A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
Luke Skywalker has returned to his home planet of Tatooine in an attempt to rescue his friend Han Solo from the clutches of the violent gangster, Jabba the Hutt. Little does Luke know that the Galactic Empire has secretly begun construction on a new armored space station, even more powerful than the first dreaded Death Star. When completed, this ultimate weapon will spell certain doom for the small band of rebels struggling to restore freedom to the galaxy. What is up, everybody? We are here, week number 6. Oh my God. We are already at week 6 of the Bombad Buildup. You know what that means? We are finishing up the original trilogy tonight, guys. Today, we are coming down to the return of the Jedi, and with it comes my buddy Scotty and also the return of a guest who is a Bombad classic.
Pretty good Jedi.
So, yes, Return of the Jedi or Return of the Brad Whipple. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, boyos. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you back, man.
Yeah, we were talking before air. It's been like 2 months, since we've interacted on the podcast sphere. So it's kind of crazy. Time's gone by. Last time we met, we were all but the learners. Now we're the avoiding Twitter as much as we caners, I guess.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes.
I wouldn't if that makes any sense.
Soul, maybe still.
Yeah, no, I'm.
To you Bombad fam out there, so
I will not venture into the Twitterverse past this release date. So anyone who needs to get in contact with me, you can send me a letter. I will give you my address after the day, after the 20th. No, in all seriousness, Brad, we're so happy to have you here, especially to talk this movie. We've had this Bombad build-up really like a big train, like a space train, going through the galaxy at full speed. And before you know it, we will be at the release of The Rise of Skywalker so soon, less than 3 weeks pretty much. So I don't know if y'all have your opening night, 7 p.m. Thursday, the 19th showing, but I am jonesing for that day. I'm taking off work. So it is going to be so amazing. I can't believe it.
Well, Scotty and Brad, I'm not saying that I'm a better fan, but I have a 6 p.m. showing. So technically,
wow.
Wait,
that's even like 5 p.m. your time, Scott.
Yes,
so
you're seeing
still makes me better than you.
Oh my God. I'm going to be kind of, honestly, if you think about it, if you have a 5 p.m. showing Central Standard Time, essentially, that means you will be seeing this movie so much earlier than me. By the time the movie ends, my movie will be starting more than likely, and all you do is.
Can you believe that?
I would drive up that evening.
You trust me?
Could you imagine? No, Brad, are you ready for that?
Luke's father?
Yeah. We all know Bendemption is happening, so we don't have to even worry about spoiling that. So
interesting
yeah,
statement. I know Brad's a big fan of that train, and you know what? This idea of redemption will definitely be brought up in this episode. This is the movie for redemption. But I guess with that being said, Brad, we're so happy to have you here. Let's get into it. So, this entire Bombad build-up, we've had guests who love this movie, who love their own particular movie be on the show. And this week we got Brad. And Brad, I want to ask you first, what does Return of the Jedi mean to you personally?
To me, it means victory, which is weird to say because there's 3 more movies after that go completely counter to that idea. But when you think about all the, the shitstorm, so-called, that ensues after Return of the Jedi in the universe of The Mandalorian, the Aftermath series, Resistance, the TV show, there's a lot that's going on that's bad, but at least for just a fleeting moment, the rebellion had their day where they could celebrate and finally no longer feel like they had their backs against the wall, or that the spark of hope could go out at any moment. So they finally, even though it's towards the end of the film and it's very brief, that is one of the lasting like images and scenery that sticks with me. And I think of even, the statue of Chancellor Palpatine being torn down, obviously very reminiscent of at the time of the Saddam Hussein statue being torn down in our own world. So there's a lot of that kind of imagery of no longer being oppressed. And I think that is a huge takeaway, and oppression from the point of our characters too. Vader is liberated. He's redeemed. He's free from the chains of his master. And those are the kind of the ideals that stick with me throughout this movie. It's why I love it.
That's awesome. I never thought about it from relating it to, I guess, real life experiences in regards to this movie in particular. And there is some things I can bring up later involving the Ewoks that deals to war and what that means, and the end of war as well. But that's a beautiful point, Brad. Jerry, why do you love this movie? Well, what does it mean to you, I guess?
Well, Return of the Jedi, and I don't know, we were texting kind of back and forth whenever I was watching it, Scotty, and talking about how it's a little hard to really, this is going to sound bad, dig for that deep meaning. It's not that there's not deep meaning in it, it's that this
takes a while.
End of the story for a while, like
yes.
we've been talking about, and so, but just, I don't know, this movie I think it was probably my favorite when I was a kid, and has moved to about my third favorite, but it's even these movies when you kind of like rank them, it's just I like this one. I watched this one less than I watched this one, but I don't know, man. There's just things about this that have really grown on me. Like, I will listen to the Battle of Endor tracks, like
oh my
Battle
God.
3, and just that entire whole end score by John Williams, Mr. Williams, and just I don't know, man. I get emotional, like especially the part where Luke is hiding underneath, and not to jump ahead, but the part where Luke is hiding underneath the platform, and Vader's underneath, kind of taunting him, saying, oh, you have a sister. Oh, well, if you won't turn, then maybe I'll turn her, and just that whole. The emotion in that, and like Luke popping out and going to town on Vader, essentially. I don't know, man. I think what gets me about this movie, what I love about this movie, is probably that final battle, that battle for the soul of the galaxy. Yeah, and that's about all I can gush right now without just spiraling into tirade.
Well, I think The Rise of Skywalker will do what this movie did in regards to the ending battle, but at a much higher pace and probably a bit more, not significant. This ending battle is very significant, but maybe at a much more enhanced experience than what we got with the Return of the Jedi. For me personally, this movie is just. I just know that I've seen this one the most. Like, I remember putting this movie in so many times the VHS player and just really taking in this movie and seeing all especially Jabba, the opening scene is amazing. But like the music, the Battle of Endor, it's probably the most kid-friendly Star Wars, just in regards to pacing and silliness and campiness. And I don't know, I think as a child, I really had a lot of love towards this movie in particular, and as an adult, I've probably grown to appreciate it more as a movie of its time too. I mean, I bring it up later. It's probably the most '80s Star Wars movie. It's like the most like generationally influenced Star Wars movie in regards to the look and the way it's shot and how silly it is and the humor. It's kind of it's very interesting. But yeah, no, I think this movie is probably one of the more dramatic Star Wars movies in regards to how huge and how big it is. But I don't know. There's a lot of things that could take apart in this movie, and I hope during our conversation today, boyos, we can really tear this movie apart in regards to its storytelling and what it does for the overall Skywalker saga. But yeah, no, I think we've stated why we love this movie enough. I just love how it makes me feel. It is like you, Brad said, it's kind of it's like the first taste of victory. Like we did it. You know, it's kind of relieving. You know, what about this movie in general makes it a great Star Wars movie? Like why would this be? I mean, I guess. I want to hear your opinions first, but I want to say one thing. This is probably the most Star Wars movie, if that makes any sense. It's like everything that we know about Star Wars is amped up to like a million with all the creatures and the silliness and the Huddies voices, and I don't know. I think it's just so Star Warsy, and the use of the Force is very interesting. It's not as deep as it was as Empire, but anyway, Jerry, why is this such a Star Wars movie? What makes this a great Star Wars movie?
Well, you know, kind of all the essential ingredients that we've been talking about since we've been doing the Bombadcast. I mean, everyone's been talking about this kind of stuff, but you look at it's got the monsters, it's got the creatures, just superficially. You know, it's got the cool, fun hero action moments. It's got just everything that you look for in a Star Wars movie. All the essential ingredients are in here. You know, be it monsters, ships, space battles, blaster fights, what have you. It is all in here, and so that's just it's quintessential Star Wars in what someone thinks of as Star Wars.
Yes.
Plus, again, talking about Jabba the Hutt, everyone knows who Jabba the Hutt is. He's like a piece of pop culture that, I mean, you know, even if they don't know like anything else about him, they know like, oh, that's
Yes.
Jabba the Hutt. They know what his name is and stuff. They get the joke in Spaceballs, you know, when he's Pizza the Hutt and stuff. So it's just. That's all it is, man. It's quintessential Star Wars. Brad, what do you think?
I will say this movie is particularly very close to my heart because I know many Bothans died to bring us this movie. And there's so much that happens. You get the classic space battle sequence. You get the good versus evil, Luke versus the Emperor. You get some more on the Force itself with that conversation right in the beginning with Yoda, which I think is one of the most important conversations of the whole movie.
Yes.
And later on with Obi-Wan. So you get those moments of mentorship in this film, but also the fact that Luke is still grappling with the fact that Darth Vader is his father, even after 3 years. And what's more close to Star Wars than trying to understand your family or like your place in the galaxy. And that's something Luke is still struggling with 2 movies later. And I think still doesn't fully know by the end of this movie, but we're along with him for that journey. And we're along with him as he still realizes, you know, there's good in his father. There's always still been that hope in there. And I think hope is the key word in Star Wars. And it's definitely prominent in this film, you know, the hope that his father will come back. There's still some good in him, that Anakin Skywalker is not truly gone. Even though Obi-Wan's telling him opposite, you know, he's more machine than man. Don't even bother trying. You have to kill him. But Luke persists in the face of those opinions and proves everybody wrong. And he proves to his later point that no one's ever really gone. And I think that's where that idea originates, is in this movie, which, you know, once the Rise of Skywalker happens and Bendemption happens, that will be the encompassing idea of the saga. And it started here.
Some good statements.
Yes.
Bring it in. No, you bring up a good point too. In my mind, immediately went to like the situations that happen in this movie probably have the greatest implication of the sequel trilogy. Like the themes mentioned with, you know, there's still good in him, especially no one's really gone, and having Palpatine's death be in this movie, then to have him only return in The Rise of Skywalker is just something that's so exciting. And hopefully looking back on these episodes of the Bombad Buildup, bringing up Palpatine, all of it will be very fruitful, I guess you can say, to the listener of the past who wants to dive back into our old stuff. And Brad, it is one of these movies that kind of does encompass a lot of the feeling of Star Wars and the Force and what we should know about each particular topic. That's great, man. But boys, are you ready? We're about to dive into it. let's talk about this meaty movie. Are you down? Are we about to fix to make this happen?
Let's do it, man. Let's get into it. I'm ready.
Diving into it like the pit of Carcoon.
Oh, snap. Here we go.
Awesome. Okay, so the main thing I want to bring up is where are we in this chapter? What is the state of the galaxy? So usually I have something written, but it's simply stated the galaxy still is at war. We still have a Star War occurring, and we are the rebels are apparently still on the run. Han Solo is still in Jabba's palace. We are kind of thrown into this movie just like every other Star Wars movie. It's a classic opening to a Star Wars movie with this Death Star flying overhead, and then it's almost very similar to A New Hope in regards to how it's framed and shot, but you see the Death Star too. You see this half-built Death Star. Now, before we go any further, I was a little kid watching these, and they had been out for years already. Did anyone have any misconceptions about the Death Star 2? Like, I had a lot as a kid, but I guess I didn't pick up on the lines that it was under construction and that this was a new Death Star. But as a kid, I thought it was the old Death Star just blown apart, like when it exploded, it's like a chunk of it exploded, and they just have the other part left over. I didn't know. What about y'all? I had no idea.
I mean, I think I always got that it was a second one, but I don't know. I don't know if anyone had any misconceptions that when it came out. I don't know. Yeah, it would be funny though if it was like they just like, well, we found this half. Just start like working on this, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know, Brad, what about you, man?
Yeah, I'm in that boat too. I will say though, what I find very interesting when you think about just movie criticism nowadays, especially at that time, I don't know what the reviews were like again with there being a second Death Star and the Empire trying to do that whole thing again. But I would tell you this day and age, if they came out and they had a second Death Star, this movie would get shredded. They'd be like, why are you building a second Death Star? It's so stupid. Like, come on, guys, really? And yeah. I'm trying to think of where they joke about that in some of the other films or like material like Robot Chicken and whatnot. But it's just pretty funny that they thought it was a good idea to build a second one. And they even reference it in The Force Awakens with Starkiller Base later on. It's just this whole running gag of like, okay, it's bigger, sure. And I know this Death Star was bigger when they showed it on Dakar in that movie. Pretty sizably bigger, I think, actually. It was like, I don't know the exact comparison, but it's like almost 4 or 5 times the size. It's pretty big. Even more than that, I think. Bigger. Yeah, like 10 times. So yeah, I got the conception that it was a new one, but we knew it was going down. Especially half finished with their basic like structural integrity exposed to the Rebel Alliance. It's a little bit of a flaw.
They just had like a bunch of that like plastic that people who were doing construction put up, you know, just like on the edges there in hallways.
Right.
And, you know, like, you gotta watch out, guys. Just don't go to corridor C, okay?
You just open it and get sucked into space.
Yes, yeah. No. I don't know what it is about Death Star 2. Because it's funny because it's just unfinished. It's like a half-built like building or so, you know. But why does it look? To me, at least, it looks cool. Like it looks cooler than the first one. I guess because it's got a little more character or something. You know, it's like a little like since it is like the size of a small moon, it's like a different phase of that moon or something almost. But
that's a good point.
It's just something about it that's always like I've always kind of liked the weird like jaggedness of it and stuff more than the perfect spherical. It feels more lived in when it's less of a sphere.
But I mean, you bring up a good point because this could somewhat, in its own weird right, symbolize the Empire's, I guess not fallen, but like it's on the brink of being over. Like, you know, like they don't have enough resources to finish building it. They're rushing it. Obviously, Moff Gerard has a lot of anxiety, which will come in later, and actually be cut later too from the movie. I think it's kind of more symbolic that it's not finished and that this war is really taking a toll on both sides, and the Empire can't even get their stuff together, you know. But we get a shot of an Imperial shuttle kind of coming down. I love that design. That's still to me as a kid, like I wish I had my Lego from whatever year, like 2002 when it came out. I loved that design, even as a little kid. But we meet a character, Moff Gerard, and I think Jerry and I can both agree he's probably our favorite Imperial officer. At least I know he's mine. What about you, Brad?
Gerard, is he? So he's the one right in the beginning. You said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ooh, double alert. Yeah.
He is. Yeah, he's a little scaredy cat. Honestly, he just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he was expecting Vader, and he definitely was not expecting the Emperor.
No.
I get the impression he's kind of the guy that's like thought he had a lot more. He thinks he has a lot more time. He likes to probably plan things out very strategically. Doesn't like to rush things, and to have all this happen at once is very overwhelming for him. I feel like he's the anxious type for sure, and I do enjoy him. I think I would say he's probably my favorite in the film. He's always one that kind of stuck out to me, that whole conversation when I was watching this movie as a kid. I just always enjoyed the dynamic between those two when he first got there. And I was like, oh, I feel bad for this guy. I feel like he's in the wrong place at the wrong time right now, honestly. Like, he was just enjoying his Corellian farming at one point in his life, and then he just got swept into this war, and now he's facing Darth Vader, and he's like, I just want to go home and eat my beets. You know? I don't know. I relate to him a little bit.
Yeah, no, Gerard is great. I wrote in there that I wanted more of him. But if I'm being honest, Scotty, my favorite Imperial officer right now, I've been watching through the Freemaker Adventures with my 2-year-old, and there is someone on there who's like running Kashyyyk or whatever, and he tries so hard. He's like trying to make sure nothing ever happens where he's at, so he doesn't have to ever do anything. And it's a very fun, I don't know, like that's very non-canon, but I just loved that it was like an Imperial officer who was like, wait, no, we shouldn't make a big deal about this because then that means something's going on. Anyway. But no, besides all that, that's basically Jar Jar too. So,
well, isn't he the villain in give me 1 second. Last Crusade, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that's General Veers.
Yeah.
Is it Veers?
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh.
I mean, this guy's in something too. I just can't quite place it right now. So you guys listening, if you want to tweet at us on Tuesday and tell us how black we are, not to recognize
We're fake fans.
Clearly massive character actor. But anyway, no, dude, I don't know. Just that whole dynamic was really cool, and that deleted scene that we'll probably talk about later, or we can talk about right now. Just how cool it would have been if you had left that in there. He would have been a little less cowardly, maybe. Yeah. And a little more like this guy it's a guy with a conscience within the Empire, which would have been real interesting.
Yeah, I wish we had saw that. That would have been...
Yeah, it would have been kind of like a little more what we've gotten today in the new canon.
Exactly.
Honestly. Aftermath and Mandalorian and such.
Totally. Yeah, no, I really have always liked one thing, too. I like how Vader's super shiny in this scene. Like, the second he steps up and that steam goes away,
Yes.
and he's, like, glossy. Like, he legitimately, his suit had just got buffed by some stormtrooper, like, on the way, like, made me look good. And when he walks on this thing, it's like all the lights are, like, boom, right off of him. He looks amazing on that dark suit. But I wrote the notes how Vader's dialogue right here makes Palpatine, I guess the Emperor, as we know him, one badass dude. Like, he's like, he will not be pleased. He is coming here. He will be here soon. Like, it's very much like if someone from corporate was coming to your office or your business. You're like, oh God, we gotta like clean up the store. We gotta like, you know, I like that aspect.
Even simply the line of Vader's where he goes like, the Emperor is not as forgiving as I am, which is hilariously scary when you think about in The Empire Strikes Back choking out just like any Imperial officer breathes the wrong way, you know? Like,
he's gonna force
you gotta be like
him.
Veers. You gotta let Vader be able to get like 2 inches from your face and not flinch, and you'll that's what you gotta be with Vader. But the Emperor, it's no dice, man. There's nothing you can do. So crazy.
Jerry, you wrote in here about Palps venturing out of the Imperial Palace. I think that's a very interesting statement because Palps really didn't need to be on the Death Star to do this whole sequence. And I want to see why do you think that? Why do you think he's trying to get to Luke? Really?
Well, I don't know. I think we were kind of talking about this last week with John. about how with the whole rule of two thing, you wonder like why were they trying to turn Luke to their side? Either like Vader was trying to become the master, or Palpatine was trying to get a new apprentice. But you also have all of the instances in the Clone Wars where Palpatine's like, yeah, okay, Dooku, why don't you go ahead and take in that Asajj Ventress? She's a nice kid. And let's train this droid, this cyborg how to use lightsabers and all that. I mean, yes, it's the rule of two, but they kind of play with it. But when I wrote this, it was just kind of interesting to me because in new canon, you have a lot of instances where like Palpatine never leaves the Imperial Palace. And if he does, it's like very secret, and no one knows but Vader. And he's usually going somewhere with Vader. So it's just interesting to see him. I'm going to make a big show out of this and come here. Very Palpatine, very ballsy, very self-assured. Like I'm going to do this, but of course it is all to draw Luke out into. I think it's his final attempt to get rid of the nuisance or gain a new power with him joining their side. So I don't know, but I thought it was just interesting with what we've got in new canon about him being a recluse. So it just kind of was like, wow, okay, he really is trying to pull out all the stops with this one.
Good point. I didn't think about that. Brad, any statement on Palpatine being kind of hyped up, and he was, I guess he was seeing The Empire Strikes Back kind of, but like to really see him be such a frail old guy, kind of in its own weird right parallels Yoda, and Yoda being such a small and frail person. I think it's kind of cool. These masters we've heard so much about are actually somewhat, feeble old people, which is very much a theme in Star Wars. But what do you think, Brad?
What I gotta say is does this dude moisturize at all? I mean, you have 25 years nearly of separation between when you get your face pruned off by Force lightning, and now you're telling me there's no Imperial technology whatsoever that could have had any sort of constructive surgery on that. Like, come on, dude. We all know Palpatine's going after Luke because he likes the young, powerful Jedi, the wiser and younger and far more powerful, as he says in the Revenge of the Sith. That's why he goes after Anakin versus an apprentice like Dooku. The dude likes this feeling of like vitality and youth, and I think that's why he's ultimately going to go after Rey and throw Ben to the side because Ben's the past. Ben is the Skywalker. He's done with the Skywalkers. So I just find it interesting that he's let himself kind of loose for this long. You would have thought that he would want to look more like younger and kind of more kept up with his looks a little bit, but yeah, no, he's sketchy. He's scary. I don't like him. I think the fact that he's coming to the Death Star definitely means that he feels the people that answer to him can't get the job done, especially Vader. Yes. And I think that's why Vader is probably a little frightened. He's when he first gets there, he's like very like kneeling. He's not talking too much. And the Emperor's bossing him around, so he's lost a little bit of faith in his apprentice. And I think he's at the point now where he's like, you know what? I'm just going to get rid of you and bring in Luke Skywalker. It's very important that you bring him to me. Like, you do not interact with him or do anything with him when he's on Endor. You just bring him right here. I don't want you messing with this potential idea that I have.
Well, this is kind of funny. One thing I want to bring up, too. This movie does something that's very different. We actually brought up in Empire Strikes Back episode with John, we brought up how it takes 24 minutes before we cut back to the Empire. This movie is a whopping 34 minutes till we even cut back to the Empire and then Palp's arrival. So everything that happens right here literally is all sequential. We go to Tatooine and we see this beautiful shot of Jabba's palace from very far away. And real quick, there's a lot of things that we can bring up that is both behind the scenes and both about the actual story of this movie. I will say R2-D2 has the best noises in this movie. I think they I don't know what they did. I don't know if Ben Burtt was like, let's just add a whole library. But most of the ones you hear from all of the Star Wars video games and everything behind it all come from this movie. And like the I love that little this movie is so good for that.
Yeah.
And we get a lot more 3PO and R2, which we've really been missing out on in regards to the sequel trilogy. And even in the prequels, we got a good bit of it too. But I will say I love seeing 3PO again, and I know everyone in this room is very excited to see more of him in The Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, no, I love that. I love that opening sequence when they go up to the door. Does anyone have any comments to make about the Ichubnibri, the little door, the ring doorbell?
I can't remember what to call those things because it's like a big serial number or something. But those, I don't know. It's always been such a. I think that originally scared me. Everything in Star Wars scared me when I was first watching it when I was a little kid. So I was a little scaredy cat, I guess. But this thing was just what is this? An eyeball that is like a door, like the doorman or something. So I don't know. I love that they brought that back in Mando, though.
Yeah.
Not to get into too many spoilers and stuff for our UK listeners and all you guys who haven't got to see it yet, but I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting thing that we'd never seen before. That I'm kind of glad that they're reusing it. So
yeah,
same look.
Yeah,
What
the thing
about you,
always
Brad?
annoyed the hell out of me as a kid. I was just rip that thing off the wall. Come on. So I've been happy recently, but that's all I'll say on that. But it was always Jabba's palace as a kid is very strange and odd. I think because there's so much happening in your imagination, and there's all these different creatures, more so than we've ever seen in this trilogy up until this point. I mean, you got Boba Fett, you got Jabba, Bib Fortuna, the Gamorrean guards, and then you got Max Rebo, who that guy definitely slaps. He's having a grand old time. He better have gotten off that sail barge, is all I will say. But there's just so much happening, and as a kid, you're like, wow, this is kind of strange. I don't know what's happening
weird
here, but it's also so sinister at the same time because this is vile scum and villainy. It's they got Twi'lek dancers here. They're probably there under duress, and you got people being kept in carbonite, prisoners, droids being destroyed. I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff that's happening here, but at the same time, it's opening up your imagination to the possibilities of this kind of underworld.
It does, and what the first weird character we really get introduced to, besides the Gamorrean guard, is Dewadawanga. My favorite secondary character will always be Bib Fortuna, and it's just the way he caresses R2-D2's head is just so creepy. He's like, no good show you now, and he's like, oh, Miki, and he's and just whispering, and it's and his little neck giblets. I'm like, this is weird.
No, I was gonna bring that up if you weren't going to. What is up with those?
They make me so uncomfortable.
Do I have those?
I don't know.
Heck?
Well, I'm looking at my Bib Fortuna, and
these are just my flesh tags.
And they have it on the Funko
So
Pop.
gross.
And you know what? Bib Fortuna is
man.
the only Funko Pop from what I've seen that has a smile and teeth. So I like that Funko Pop. I wish all Funko Pops had teeth, but Bib Fortuna has this creepy, sharp teeth in his, and I just love his red eyes. No, his pink eyes, and his fleshy. His skin is just so human, fleshy. It's weird. I love it. I think it's a great character.
Let's just say he's not maybe not the most handsome
No.
male. I was watching this with. I'm trying to remember which. I had both of my brother-in-laws in town for
nice.
this last Thanksgiving, and we were watching bits and pieces of this. And I think it was my brother-in-law, my wife's brother. He was asking me all these kind of questions and stuff because he likes to ask questions about Star Wars to me. And he goes, "Oh, so those are Twi'leks, right?" I was like, "Yeah." And I said, "And Bib Fortuna is actually a male Twi'lek." And he's like, "What? Are you?" They look so. His head is so bulbous.
Oh,
and he's got little weird giblet thingies and yeah. It's quite. He's quite something to behold. So, Scotty, you guys, it's a match made in heaven, buddy. They gotta have fun.
I love when Jabba just throws him to the side. He's like, "You're under a Jedi mind trick, you numbnut.
Yeah.
Off with you."
Well,
Great.
I just like that character, and you can see him throughout the Clone Wars a little bit, and you definitely see him in the Phantom Menace. But one thing I want to bring up that I don't think anyone else has brought that up. Maybe I haven't listened to enough podcasts, but the Return of the Jedi sequence is I'm sorry, the sequence itself. Whenever we first get introduced to Jabba, there's this weird Jabba Mozart music that's played. I don't know if y'all picked up on that. It's very bizarre. Mm-hmm. It's like it's a lot of flashy piano, and he's sitting there like they all look stoned. I mean, they all look like really big.
Well, he has a hookah lounge. We know this. It's in Battlefront.
Yes.
That is on the special edition CD soundtracks they released. I think
is it really?
The DVDs were it was first released on DVD, and it's listed as Jabba's Rogue Recital.
Oh wow! I did not know that.
So Jabba was a man of class.
Yes,
he was
clearly.
Jabba, you're a wonderful human being. So there you go.
Yeah. Oh, I hate that line. Don't even bring it up. I think in these scenes in particular, this is probably one of the more reflective Star Wars movies. And Brad, did you have anything you want to say about that in particular, or anything in regards to it being very 80s looking and feeling?
Yeah. I think he's got a good playlist. I would say maybe not for the parties I would host. I would let him take a hold of the Spotify playlist, but the guy's got some style. He's literally built himself a pedestal to sit on because he is so large and he just doesn't want to move and he's eating toads. I mean, the dude is as extra as they come.
Oh, that's awesome.
He literally has a pit that he can just open a door and throw people down into if he's upset in any possible way. Like extra. That's all I can say about Jabba the Hutt. I have strong feelings about him. He repulses me. I remember as a kid, the one thing that I was always just the most repulsed by was when his tongue sticks out, which this is getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but with like Leia, when she gets taken and before she gets put in the bikini and he sticks his tongue out and 3PO's like, oh, I can't bear the watch. That always just grossed me out as a kid. I was like, nope, I do not like Jabba.
He constantly has mucus or whatever.
Right.
Mouth. I mean,
it's like, isn't that what Bib's for? Is he's like, I mean, his name is literally Bib. Like, you're supposed to be wiping this dude's mouth to get the drool off of him. It's disgusting.
Oh. He's like standing just off camera with like a little napkin. He's dabbing the corners of his lips constantly.
God. That green mucus.
The Star Wars story we always wanted. They're Disney Plus. Come on, get on it. So
I think we're going to see Jabba show up in some form, hopefully in a Make Solo 2 happen scenario. But no, hopefully Brad will watch it. I have a feeling that if they really recreate a puppet form of it, it'd be incredible. But one thing I want to bring up, it kind of feels like this whole Jabba Palace thing feels like a scene from the Clone Wars. Like all of it. The plot is very bizarre. It's like, we're going to drop R2 and 3PO off. Lando's already there. Chewie's going to get dropped off. Leia's going to get dropped off. Han's already there. Luke's going to save the day. Not quite happened. And then like, it's a very weird sequence that I think someone, who was it? Brian Young? Maybe someone like last year, like, this actually makes no sense if you think about it. Like, what was the B plan? What was the A plan? Like, what was really supposed to happen? Like, none of this seems like a plan. Like, they get trapped almost with a die. Like, I don't know.
I'm excited for the new Star Wars comic series by Charles Soule that's going to explore between Empire and Return of the Jedi. I want to see what that planning process looks like.
There's a whole comic
Luke's
series.
like, okay, guys, listen up. The droids are going to go in there. We're going to sell them to Jabba. Leia, you're going to go undercover as a bounty hunter. Lando, you're going to get a job there. You're just going to go in and have an interview, and you're going to get hired right away. Like, you're good. And then Chewbacca, you're going to be a prisoner. It's going to be great, guys. And then I'm not even going to have my lightsaber. What?
It's a very Jedi plan. I always liked what Joseph Scrimshaw of Force Center just talked about, how it's the most Jedi of Jedi plans, because it's like, okay, we're going to what's it? His thing is a Jedi's code of conduct is, okay, I'm going to tell you to stop. If you don't stop, I'm going to take a limb, or take a limb, and then the head. It's like it's a little bit of a ramp up that the Jedi have to do. I guess. So, I don't know. Maybe Luke is just really trying to capture that inner Jedi spirit, but also he's probably just really bad at planning. He just wanted to look really cool jumping around on the sail barge. So
that is definitely a part of this, and I like how in this sequence in particular, 3PO's like, wait, what? That's not the message. And of course, it leads into the sequence where they both go through, I guess, some sort of a reconditioning or some sort of sequence where they are assigned jobs. And I like the droid that's in charge of the other droids. It's kind of interesting. He's such an evil looking dude, and he's like, you are a feisty little one. I love that. I think it's great. Droid rights, it does not really apply here, honestly. But yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, like you said here, you get droids in charge of droids, so it's there a little bit, but it's kind of weird if you think about it, like a droid torture chamber, like the little guy, the poor little Gonk Droid, getting his feet
awful.
burned, walk in. It's like,
Screaming.
I didn't think you could feel that, but apparently you can. So, very sorry, sir.
Classic Star Wars there. Brad, any thoughts on that in particular?
Yeah, you're talking in regards to the droids' rights?
Yeah, because I think that's something that's actually not really talked about in central canon, but in the areas around canon, and L3 in particular, it is kind of brought up. Now, it's funny looking back at it now.
Yeah, and even it's explored a little bit in Last Shot, I think, too, the Daniel Jose Older novel, and that's post Return of the Jedi as well, with Lando and Han Solo. Mm-hmm. So this is definitely an idea that's been kind of continued on throughout the canon. And I do like that it is brought up because, when you think about it, it is pretty sad if the droid's only purpose is to serve like beings, but at the same time, the droids do have feelings, even though they're very technical and they're very mathematical and analytical. They still have some sort of emotion and attachment, and I think there's definitely a point to where you can completely subdue that in a droid. I mean, I look at a droid like K2SO, and there are a lot of KX series droids that are very formal. Like we see one in Jedi Fallen Order that is like completely just like, you're past enemy lines, you have to be apprehended, blah, 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 and they have certain programming that they align to. But like, K2SO is able to go away from that programming and have personality and have spunk. So it is very sad to watch these droids get demolitioned, especially the Gonk Droid. I mean, we all love a good Gonk Droid. So to watch the little dude's feet get burned off just ruins me every time, brutal. Honestly.
Sad.
This movie has little moments like this in the Ewok scene later that you're kind of like, oh, and this is actually, I never thought about it. I'm sorry, I just had a realization. Like, this movie has several, like, 4 or 5 small moments at each, like, pivotal scene in the movie of, like, something you're kind of like, that's kind of sad. Like, the Gonk Droid's feet, the Rancor owner, him crying, the Ewok getting killed, and the other Ewok. That's
the one that gets me.
That's the big one.
But I love that George threw those kind of weird things in. Then we get, oh God, Jerry, you can talk about this next sequence.
Well, I'm assuming the way it's written in the notes, it is supposed to be read like this: "Freaking Jedi rocks!" All right. Okay. So we've got the whole dance sequence, and really, all this really leads to is poor Ula. Speaking of going, that's sad.
Another sad part. I guess you're right.
Jeez. But there's a little song that a lot of people really don't care for, called Jedi Rocks. I don't really mind. It's like Dave Matthews Band in space.
Can I tell you how I learned about it?
It is what it is.
Do you mind? Look, I gotta tell Brad.
No, go ahead.
Brad, I never had watched the DVD versions ever, or the Blu-ray versions ever. I only watched the VHS, THX versions, okay? So here I am. I had heard Jedi Rocks on the 2005 Battlefront 2 when you do the, what mission is it called? When you play on Tatooine, Mos Eisley, and you can play as
With
all the heroes
and stuff.
And they played Jedi Rocks. And in 2005, in third grade, I was like, this slaps. Like, this is amazing. I never heard this song before.
Oh, no.
And, of course, when I grow into my high school days, I discovered Jedi Rocks on YouTube. And I'm like, this is awful. I hope I never have to sit through this and whenever I watch Star Wars. Because I only had the VHSs. And then again, I am a weird purist. I have the Harmy despecialized versions as well that I'm very proud of and watch. But I had to watch Disney Plus version. Here it is, and the guy's spit flying out of his mouth, and the Ula like.
Gotta love that Zhao Yaoza, man.
And then the three,
a cat, man.
the Rhodian and the other two lady singers are all like unbelievable. Unbelievable. I wasn't even mad. I was just like, why? When did Star Wars
disappointed.
deviate? This is more Disney than anything Disney has done to Star Wars. Like,
oh my God, I know.
My friend, that was there in good old 1997. So
that's why I laugh when people are like, "We need to go back to the old Star Wars." I'm like, "That's your old Star Wars?
Exactly."
McClunky is exactly the spirit of Star Wars.
Oh my God.
It is.
Like, J.J. Abrams would never pull a stunt like that. I'm sorry. Like, I mean, as much as I love the creator and the maker, George Lucas, he has some questionable additions on the special edition or a special trilogy. And I know what he was going for. I know he wanted to play in the sandbox of add whatever he could, but it's just, oh God, this is the kind of thing that just lowers Return of the Jedi slowly on my list every time I watch.
Okay, I'll say it.
Yeah.
Lafty Neck definitely slaps. I like me some Lafty Neck. I feel like I am the only freaking person who does not hate Jedi Rocks.
You probably don't. It's because you look like that guy.
I don't hate it. I'm just like, I don't know. That was the version I saw. Maybe it's because it's the first version I saw on the big screen.
That might be it.
I don't
respect
know.
that.
It's also probably because I'm an annoying person, and so that it doesn't really get to me. So, it's ineffective. It just like hits like a force field and then slides right off. So
one of the first tweets I ever put out making fun of Jerry was the one of the guy singing Jedi Rocks, and I said, "Oh my God, I now know why Jerry likes the special editions." And this alien looks just like Jerry to me. Just the way he's.
Oh, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. Of course.
Yeah, that means you're canon.
I know.
That's a good compliment.
Big flat nose.
No, I like Slice Noodles role in this sequence as well with her mouth. Like it's, I don't know. I know that George.
Don't tell me you never wanted to look straight down her tube mouth. I mean, like.
Yeah, no, that was always been a dream.
Man, it's like I wonder what the inside of her mouth looks like. There you go.
Spare myself that image.
Just for good measure, here's Zhao Yaoza, and here's a little turtle guy playing the harmonica, the space harmonica. Okay,
dude, that is
I just love Star Wars weird
Me
Star
too.
Wars.
I do.
There's nothing more weird than friggin' Jedi Rocks, man. It's like hold on. We gotta take a short break in this here Star Wars movie to do a Muppets musical number. So here we go, and it's not even Muppets; it's more of a Pixar number, of course. But the effects could be updated a little bit, but they held up a little bit for me on the Blu-ray, especially because they made the colorization look like the old VHS.
Yeah, they have.
It was a little less
shocking, jarring.
I don't know. What can I say? Because I like it. So
one thing I want to bring up too is the one thing I don't like about it is how like the harmonica man starts a song and the singer's like nah. And I'm like, oh, probably better than what you're about to play. But
you never heard that? You never had done that? In a venue?
It's a Kanye West moment, honestly. He's like, no. I'm gonna let you finish, but hear my song first.
It is kind of like
Max Rebo had the best song of all time.
He did. It is like
Max Rebo slaps.
I mean, why didn't they just get Figure and Dan to go do that set? But anyway,
but real quick, before we're off of the band, let's go to our good boy Max Rebo. Feet or no feet? Because apparently that's a debate these days. Does Max Rebo have feet like the actor?
I had a plush of him with
or
feet.
does he not?
I had a plush with him with feet. Yes, he has feet.
Well, see, I did too, but apparently the character, I don't know where it was. It's like some older people are like, no, he just had the hand. He was playing with his feet, and that was the thing. Like he was sitting on top like a pad. I know. I never knew this was a controversy until like this year.
He had holes in his fingers.
That's like the little suction cup stuff.
Yes.
I say because I like the thought of him with feet. I don't think it looks like, what is he, Sebulba? Like walking around with feet he would literally look like one of those Muppets, those phenomena. So.
See, looking at the Lego action figure of Max Rebo, it shows he has feet.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh
yeah. See, and there's a lot of action figures where he does, but I was listening to a podcast or something, and they were like, no, he didn't have feet back in the day, like the puppet or whatever. Anyway, I think we are all on firmly in the team feet here.
Yes.
Yeah. Max Rebo has feet. If you guys take anything away from this episode, it needs to be that Max Rebo does have feet.
The title of this episode.
Oh my gosh. Can that be the title of this episode? I know it's the Bombad Buildup. Can we have like a hyphen or something?
I will make sure the first statement said in the description is Max Rebo has feet. I'm writing it down right now.
I am starting the hashtag. Whenever I'm promoting this episode, guys, today I'm starting the hashtag Max Rebo has feet. Join me.
Speaking of feet, this is a very terrible transition. Leia walks into Jabba's area and she has Chewbacca around her little hand, and she's actually not Leia, she's Whoosh. And I love the solo. I love the solo tie-in now. I think it's amazing with the thermal detonator, and how Han told her the story, and having it actually work in this movie is pretty awesome. With he's holding a thermal detonator, and then the oh. It's so weird. It's so Star Wars though, and I really dug it, and it's kind of cool that we see Han and Carbonite and everything too, but
yeah.
What'd you want to say, Brad?
Thinking of Lady Proxima. That's not a thermal detonator. That's a rock, and you just made a clicking noise with your mouth.
Can we get another special edition where like Lady Proxima is just kind of hanging out in the back, like with like sunscreen over her face or something?
She's got like an umbrella and goggles on, UV 150.
Just have her like heckling from the back. Don't believe it. It's a trick.
Been there, done that.
I like how this is like a mystery character in this sequence when it's really not the case. Later, of course. And the reveal of Lando is pretty amazing in this scene as well. If I'm not mistaken, it's during this scene, right? It's kind of tongue-in-cheek.
It's like after they're taking Chewbacca to the dungeon. Also, shout out to Solo Star Wars Story for showing that was a costume on
Skiff guard.
Falcon or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was just such a cool little I freaked out whenever I was watching.
That was amazing.
And Beckett was wearing Lando's disguise. Like, oh my gosh, it was so cool.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was probably one of my favorite callbacks to Solo as well, which explains a lot in terms of like how the plan got set up for this movie. It's like, okay, he had the outfit, so it was easier to apply for the job in that outfit rather than Lando going in there, no disguise, being like, hey, can I work here?
Right.
Jabba's like, is that you, Lando? No, it's not me.
Hey, go grab one of the Tusk helmets from the back.
Well, I like how unnecessary when Lando leans into the shot and he like pulls down his mask to look at, I don't even know. It's very tongue in cheek. It's very much like, we gotta show it to him. How are we gonna do it? And he looks in. He's like pulls his mask down, gives us very kind of like off camera, like barely looking off camera. It's amazing.
It's very space fantasy Saturday morning cereal.
But also you're like, oh, Lando's here too. It's kind of relieving, like Chewbacca's here and he's in trouble, but at least Lando's here. I love this part. I love the fact of after this it cuts outside Jabba's castle. Good establishing shot. But even since I was a kid, I love the the creature that's like sitting outside, kind of camouflage, and he slings his tongue out and he eats that little critter that walks by and then he burps. I'm like, that is so George.
That's great.
This is pretty much watching Return of the Jedi is like what happened in the prequels later. You know what I mean? Like just like the silliness of it.
Can you imagine if there was this much belching in Star Wars movies, though? You know, I mean, like, sheesh, this is the most, right? I mean, we've got a fart in Phantom Menace, but besides, I haven't brought that up in a long time, though. The fart joke in the Phantom Menace. So there you go. Call back to you, hardcore Bombad listeners. So.
Yeah, Geeks and Gamers would probably have like a 4-hour video about it.
Why do you have belching in Star Wars?
Kathleen Kennedy likes belching, so they put it in the movie for their whatever agenda, their belching agenda.
Their burping agenda.
Oh, God, I can't believe it.
To show that women can burp.
And it's not true. I know, my mom never did.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in The Rise of Skywalker in terms of silliness and just typical Star Wars. Like
in terms of belching?
Yeah, in terms of belching.
Over under 50%. Will we get a belch in Rise of Skywalker?
One. We'll get one. And it's going to be from little tiny dude. What's his name? Frick.
Yep. Babu Frick.
He's going to burp.
I was just thinking that would be who
of all
belched,
the...
sure.
Don't know why.
You know what?
We did.
I'm going to go all in. I'm going to say palps as soon as he comes in. That's how he's going to reveal himself. He's going to walk out from behind like a piece of rubble and go, hey, what's up, guys? I'm back.
He's going to be like, I've been holding that one in for 35 years.
Yeah. I've been really trying to be quiet over here, so I'm just going to let it out real quick.
We kind of did get...
A moment like in Austin Powers or something. You know?
Well, we did kind of get the silliness like of the Suka in the second episode of The Mandalorian. That's pretty silly and disgusting, so... I mean, they're still holding true.
True.
They're still holding true to that weirdness. But one thing I wrote in my notes, I don't know if y'all agree, but the Jabba scene, this part where they're all sleeping together, is like a giant brothel. I don't like it. They're all like, it all looks very slimy, and they're all sleeping on each other. Like you can look and you can see the oh God, who lives on Mon Cala? The how do I know this when I'm watching Mando?
Sorry, you're talking about the not the Mon Calas, but not the Mon Calamari, but the Corrin.
What's wrong with us? We know this. We're Star Wars fans.
The Corrin.
Yeah, the Corrin. The Corrin's sleeping on a roadie, and I'm like, this is weird. Like, they all just smoked a lot of pot.
I don't know if I would go to brothel, but definitely giant, seedy slumber party for sure.
It feels humid. Like I watch this scene and I feel it feels like
do crime together.
It just feels humid in that room. I just don't like it.
You can. This is the only Star Wars movie that it could be in smell-o-vision, and it doesn't. You can just sense the body odor that must be in that room for sure. So
yeah, definitely. And I like that Leia walks in and immediately makes noise. I think it's hilarious. I think that probably woke up.
It's that darn helmet.
It's small. One thing I will say is that maybe not as a kid, but like now that you think about it, do you think anyone was like, "Oh, that's totally Leia" when they first watched it, or is this like a kind of a small reveal? I don't know. I think it might have been a very subtle reveal.
It's been it's hard whenever you think about Star Wars reveals like the original trilogy because I feel like it's been a part of my life forever, but I feel like I didn't know. What about you?
Yeah,
I didn't. It's hard for me to remember because I watched these as like a 4-year-old, but I would say maybe for like the average moviegoer, I mean, if you've been waiting 3 years to see this movie, you might not make the connection right away. So I think it could have been like a good subtle reveal.
Yeah.
But to finally get her to take off the helmet and be like, somebody who loves you. It would have really been funny if Han had said the wrong name. He's like, Kira? And he's just like, what? Okay, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave now. Bye. So luckily he was like, at least conscious enough to say the right name because I'm sure the guy got around a little bit in Solo 2. But that was a good touching moment to get that reunion when he gets out of Carbonite. The actual process of being removed from the carbonite always kind of weirded me out, like his mouth coming through and like the redness of everything. I was like, dude's getting sunburnt right now somehow, and then eventually he wasn't, but that's what it looked like to me as a kid at least.
I agree.
It is funny that his lips, like, it almost is like his lips went first. That's a great, like pull there, Brad, because that was kind of weird. It's just like, I don't know, his lips are just a little more like, it's almost like Leia was like, do the lips first. I want to make sure those are nice and before I get to them, you know.
And I want to know,
George is like faster and more intense.
Han,
Now smack your lips harder. Okay. Good. A little more. Let's get a little more schmutz on them. There. Yeah, good.
All right. It's good.
I like that Han is like cold and hot and sweaty, and it's like he has flu-like symptoms. You know, like he's like, I can't see. Who are you? It's just,
what kind of flu do you get where you go blind?
I don't know.
That's insane. It's crazy, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
Just the effects of carbonite, which it's kind of cool that they did, because it is a little like, okay, but how long has that dude been in there? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know.
No, I really, give me 1 second. I really dug like how much this kind of feels like Solo to me. It's just all about Han and how he kind of gets his tail saved again. And one thing I want to say too is after the sequence we really get introduced to like Han and Chewie meeting again, and it feels just like Solo. You know, the movie. I almost said the short film. It feels just like Solo. They're like in a jail cell. They're reunited, and like I love how Chewie's like freaking out. It's almost opposite of what happens in Solo, really, if you think about it. But it's kind of heartwarming. And one thing I want to say is I don't know if anyone ever brought it up, but like Leia's voice sounds a lot more like it does in the sequel trilogy in this movie. It's a little more raspy. And I don't know if it's from Carrie Fisher's abuse of drugs and alcohol. I really don't know. But her voice like transformed over the 3 years between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And it sounds a lot like it does in TFA and TLJ in this movie in particular. You know?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, too, they're filming A New Hope, in 76?
Yeah.
So it's like another 6 years
Exactly.
almost when they're filming this one. So I think it just probably comes with age a little bit,
probably
too. And, yeah.
But
I didn't think of that, but it does sound...
that yelling at Han Solo, though, But, no, yeah, it's weird to think, that's a good point, Brad, that this was almost half a decade, or over half a decade, that they were making this thing. I don't know, it's weird to think that because they make them so quickly now.
Yeah.
You know?
Time actually passed then. You know, now it's like, I'll never forget when TLJ was first in production. It was like the Force Awakens premiere happened in December, and then by January they were filming TLJ. You know? It's just
crazy.
It is crazy. But one thing I want to bring up too is, of course, Leia ends up getting in the slave outfit, and I really don't want to touch too much on that.
Hut Slayer.
It's I don't.
It's Hut Slayer, Leia.
I don't know if it upsets me now or if I think it's weird now, but it's definitely a reflection of the time. If I'm going to be at all honest with you, sexualization of women, especially in movies of the '80s, like Weird Science. This movie in particular, you know, there's a lot of things that really wouldn't happen in regards to our female heroes, but Leia does it in such a and she's beautiful, but she does it in such a way that it's not. I don't know. It doesn't. I never saw. I mean, it's definitely sexualized, but I never was like, oh wow, look at all that. I guess I was just a kid, and you're like, oh, that's just this scene in the movie, you know. But I know for Carrie and the rest of her life, it was not easy. You know, going through her life, hearing people bring it up to her, you know.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the slave outfit, especially just with her even in like A New Hope when she would ask George like, you know, like why she can't wear like a bra or something underneath her outfit, and he's like, there's no bras in space, like jokingly, and I'm like, okay, that's like, you know, like really? Yeah. So those kinds of things do definitely give me an eye roll, at least now. Yeah. But I'm glad we're kind of past that point in the Star Wars universe to not have to like resort to those kinds of like tropes. Because our women are definitely, you know, front and center now, and I don't want them to be like hypersexualized like that. You know,
and I like that Carrie acknowledged it, which is a huge thing because she could have easily not acknowledged it, and that's her as a person too. And I know like that's a beautiful thing about Carrie Fisher. Like even when she had to give George's like whatever speech it was like for that award, and she's like, "There's no broad in space," blah, 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 and he's like, "Up yours, George." By the end of it, it's like that is so Carrie Fisher, and it's just I don't know. I'm
even though she was she had to like deal with those things in her time. Like she never seemed like the kind of person that was being like subjugated. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like she always like found a way to like make light of it or just go like. And she even like I remember, was it before or after filming Force Awakens? She was telling Daisy Ridley like just never let him put you in a metal bikini.
Yeah.
Or something,
Yeah.
Like, so, not to say it was right, but just like, I just miss Carrie like all the time because the way that she like just kind of dealt with those kind of things and talked about it. Like she was supportive and like saying, "Hey, we need to move past this," but she just kind of like never let anything get her down.
No.
And she just was like, she just laughed. She was like, "You know what? Yeah, that happened, and so now I'm gonna
like that.
move and try to make things better for the women to come after me." And I would argue that she 100% did.
Yeah, totally. And it brings up a good point when people cosplay as it. It to me it catches a lot of attention at Celebration and stuff. They always have it every year, but it's almost fun to see like a change on that same exact theme. Like I saw someone had a Mickey Mouse in the slave Leia, or like a guy in a slave Leia, or like it's fun to see what people can do with. It's acknowledged that it is a silly thing. You know what I mean? It is definitely addressed now that it's something that's so absurd and it can be brought up, which I'm glad us three white males can talk about it without being over sexualized. I mean, it's true. I mean, people really could go on about this in a negative and a not empowering way, but it's fun to see that it's now joked about. You know what I mean? And
yeah, well, I know at Celebration Chicago, I walked up on the picture being taken, like one of the dioramas, like a giant diorama, and I would say about 50 to 70% of the Leias up there, the slave Leias up there, were like men.
Yeah,
So,
it's awesome.
It's definitely something that is. I don't know if we'll ever have it out of the Star Wars DNA, but it's definitely something that is parodied.
Oh yeah,
for sure. So.
It's still Star Wars, and we get this opening for Luke right after. Of course, we see Slave Leia, and I think it's so cool for Luke because it's all black, and I love that Jabba in this sequence in particular is very well aware of the Force, and he might be the first not Jedi character that's super aware of it. He's like, "No, you fool! He's got you under a Jedi mind trick." And this sequence in particular really paints Luke to be a badass. And I don't know how much I want to talk about the Rancor sequence, but I think it's a great sequence. But to me, it's just like another filler suspense moment in the movie, and it's hyped up, of course. And this is where it feels like a Clone Wars episode. Feels like an episode of The Mandalorian or something. It's just like these little tropes that are brought up, like you keep saying, Jared, like a Saturday morning cereal. It's just like these silly little things that happen.
Yeah, man, this like that's one thing I love about Return of the Jedi is it feels just like the most like Saturday morning cartoon like fun.
Yeah.
Like I'm watching gosh, I don't want to date myself here. Just like getting up and watching like your favorite they used to have like fun like action cartoons like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and stuff when like the real Ghostbusters was my jam, man.
Yeah.
Just like watching your heroes another week, just like, oh, they're in more trouble, But I don't know, man. It's like Empire kind of set the bar for like giant monsters and stuff like that. And we don't have quite as large of a monster as the Storm, but just I've always loved the Rancor, man. The Rancor is so freaking cool. Like I remember when they came out with the I don't know if it was the Power of the Force version of it, but
I
they came
remember
out
that as a set.
with the 3 3/4 scale.
Yeah.
I still have it upstairs in my tote of old Star Wars toys and stuff, and man, that thing still looks good.
It does look good.
Oh man, I that was probably my favorite creature for a long time, and I don't know, thinking about it right now, it's probably just because I'm all in Return of the Jedi headspace.
Yeah.
It's it's still pretty high up there.
Yeah.
That's just that whole sequence. I mean, that poor maybe not defenseless Gamorrean guard, but he just falls down there, and all he does is try to climb back up the tube. And
It's awful.
He slurps him up like vermicelli, man. Like he's just like his arm is sticking out, like it's gone.
Done.
Just such a fun sequence, man. That's that whole thing is just so much fun. And of course, Luke just hides under a rock, which is that's what Luke does. He does it here. He does it in The Last Jedi. So.
Damn, good point. No,
Luke should pitch for the Yankees. I'm a Yankees fan. We need some good bullpen action. Get that man a rock. Put him on the mound.
Gosh.
90 feet's nothing with the Force. That's all I'm saying.
What an arm, right? What an arm.
well, one thing I want to bring up, I love how ancient the storytelling is. Like, it's very Greek. It's very, like, ancient monster battle. Like, why can't I think of the name of the famous, not Oedipus, oh well, it is gonna come to me later.
Like Homer, Odyssey?
Yeah, Odyssey. It's like the Odyssey. It's very like
the Odyssey
battling the Cyclops. Like that's what it feels like. But
yeah.
I love after the sequence, all of them are like all in Jabba's presence again. And it's like Luke and Han and Leia, and there's a little bit of banter between them. And I actually love and I think everyone has a soft spot for the Sarlacc scene. I think it's an amazing sequence, and with the build up to it, and Jabba, this will be your last, mistake or whatever he says to him, and then the lightsaber jumps out the air, and I don't know, I think it's a very cool and very Saturday morning serial feeling scene. It's just super bombastic, and I don't know. Does anyone have anything they would bring up about that moment besides Boba Fett's death? I think, which is significant, but does anyone have anything else they want to say about that whole build up?
I think this is a very Jedi route to take, especially with Luke, because he gives him one last chance, free us or die.
Yeah.
Like, I'm taking the Jedi path right now. I'm telling you, you don't want to go down this route.
Yeah.
Like, it will end badly for you. And he gave him the warning. Yep. Nope, Jabba no basa, whatever the heck he says at some point. He does not want to budge, nope. And Green Slimy over there is gonna get his due when he gets choked out by Leia. One of those greatest moments in Star Wars is just her killing Jabba the Hutt. It's awesome. After all the crap that they've put that crew through with having to hunt down Han Solo, and a little good redemption there for the crew to get rid of him. So no longer in the galaxy bugging everybody. Although I do wonder if the Hutt clan at some point does survive.
Good point.
Somewhere else in the galaxy.
Yeah.
There's got to be something going on. I think it's in this next episode of Resistance that maybe came out this week that we have a new Hutt.
Yeah.
Well, at least maybe he's not a part of the crime family. I think if I remember from the clip, he owns a casino or something, which I haven't seen it yet. We'll see by the time this episode airs. I may have seen it, but I don't know. I would love to see that. And again, just making reference to Leia's whole arc in Bloodlines, where Rin Riven Dai calls her the Hutt Slayer. Man, I would take the title of Slave Leia and just put Hutt Slayer on there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just anyway. Yeah. But I freaking love that title. Is so cool. Because she takes him out. I don't know. She is. That was. I don't know. That's just such a good part. I can't gush any. I've already said, Brad. That was great.
Well, one thing I want to bring up too about Boba Fett. There's so much speculation in the air as if he's dead or not. I want to hear everyone's opinion here because I've never asked anyone this on the pod before. But Brad, do you think Boba's dead, or do you think he might have made it out, or what do you think?
I think it's the last we've seen of him. However, I don't think that he necessarily died in the Sarlacc. Yeah. I think if he could have escaped, he would have been way too wounded potentially to live on. But I know it's kind of hinted at in the Aftermath series that someone may have potentially stolen his armor out of the Sarlacc. So, because I know at least the traders on Tatooine recognize the pattern or the color scheme of it. Mm-hmm. So I think his name's like Corvanth or something like that. So I think he's long gone. I don't think we'll see him again. However, I think we will probably catch him in reference or in name at some point, especially being, the son of the person who started the clone army. So the Fett name is obviously a very important one in the galaxy of events that have happened in the last, 40 to 50, 60 years.
Yeah, I agree. Jerry, anything about Boba?
No, I mean, I think he's alive, but it's not because I'm kind of in the middle on this. I don't I don't hate Boba, but I'm also like, Boba Fett or die,
Yeah.
I don't know. George, I believe, I forget when this was. It was before the Disney acquisition, but I think he was asked one time what he thought, and I think George, being ever the editor, said that he believes that Boba Fett is alive, and so I guess if he was doing anything, he'd probably just throw Boba Fett in or something. So
Yeah.
who knows? I don't really think everyone's like, oh, he's going to pop up in The Mandalorian. I mean, he could maybe on down the line. I think Favreau and Filoni have said we're going to get maybe a few legacy characters eventually, at least referenced maybe. So I don't know. I think there's possibility, but yeah, like you said, Brad, I think it was Cobb Vanth or something, who's the guy who has his armor on Tatooine right now. I think, if I'm remembering right, it talked about like how the Jawas found the Sarlacc like blown open. So I don't know. I think there's evidence that he is kicking around somewhere out there, but
yeah. When you think about it too, that whole barge exploded, so all those pieces go into the Sarlacc,
Right.
So the Sarlacc probably doesn't agree with what it's eating.
Yeah.
Very true. Very
So
true.
dies, opens up, and out crawls Boba Fett. So I think he got out of there. I just don't know necessarily how long he survived in that desert, stranded.
Right.
The heat will probably get to him and kill him alone.
Yeah.
So depending on how far he is out from a nearest spaceport.
Well,
Right.
one thing I want to bring up too is like, I love how Boba Fett goes out. It's so Phasma. It's so like, oh God, like it's just so, it's so cheated. But I mean, that's just how it is in Star Wars sometimes. I whenever the Mandalorian's first episode came out, I had gotten texts from every one of my friends that was like, oh my God, this might answer so many questions. This is just there's a big spoiler at the end that's gonna answer questions and stuff. And I'm like, the bounty's 50 years old. It is 1,000% going to be Boba Fett. That would be amazing. And then it came out, I'm like, nothing like I expected. But I think that's the point. I think that's why they set up the bounty that way. It was going to be, in my head, it was going to be Boba Fett. And how cool would it have been to see Tamora Morrison's face, versus the Mando. But definitely not the case of what we got. And I won't go into it.
Right.
But yeah, no, with that being said, I do love how Leia takes charge and kills Jabba. I think that part's great. And one thing I want to bring up too, you forget that Jabba has a tattoo on his arm. And it's like a very brief in one shot, his arm goes up and you see like this huge arm tattoo. It's kind of cool. I do love when they escape. The musical cues in this sequence are so good. Like the droids are in the sand and they get lifted out and they speed off and then the sail barge explodes. It's amazing. It's very Anakin. Like the whole plan is just loosely planned. No one knows what they should be doing, how it should be going. I do like that. And one cool thing I wanted to bring up too is when Luke gets his hand shot in that sequence in particular. You see that in The Last Jedi later. It's amazing. You see like his hand being damaged. And it's I'm very happy they kept that subtlety in. But real quick, we finally cut back to the Empire. It's been 34 minutes in the time of the movie, that's an insane amount of time to like take a little short trip. But Palpatine arrives and the music is so good. And he says one line that I think is very interesting: "Rise, my friend." Says that to Vader, and I never thought of them as being friends, but I guess they are friends. Now, I want to ask you about this. This is interesting because it dawned on me watching it. Does Palpatine really care about the Death Star? Like, Vader obviously didn't give a single crap about it in A New Hope. But do you think Palpatine, I guess for the sake of ruling the galaxy, but like take a step back and think about it. Do you think Palpatine really cares for it, or is his end goal Luke? What do you think, Brad?
Well, that answer could change depending on what happens in this next movie. Because I don't know if we'll get any sort of explanation as to his larger plan this whole time. because I know there's a couple of lines that he talks about in here, saying, everything is going as I have foreseen.
Yeah.
What is everything? It's not just the Death Star. It's not just Luke. I think there's this larger plan that's been hinted at for so long. And when you think about something like a world between worlds and this idea of achieving immortality, he's always been very obsessed with cheating death.
Yeah.
That's very important to him. And again, getting all these like young apprentices to be his second hand is very important to him because he wants to retain his youth. That's something that he very like much prides himself in with his wardrobe and everything else. I mean, so I think truly at the end of the day, he doesn't care about the Death Star. He realizes that there's a larger purpose to everything. And even if this fails, so what? Because you got to imagine they probably should have put more of the Empire on that base, having known it's half finished and like Luke Skywalker's coming.
Good
like,
point.
I get it might kind of play into the Emperor being overconfident, like Luke says, but at the same time, you got to have some sort of plan. And I mean, he does. He has a contingency plan. So clearly the Death Star wasn't the last resort.
Exactly.
It's not the most important thing to him.
Right.
So I think there's a lot more going on larger scale, and the Death Star doesn't really scratch the surface.
Yeah, that's a beautiful statement you made about, in particular, him being, hey, he's a pretty busy dude. I mean, he's always thinking about the next step. And I don't know. I think the Death Star is one of those things that might have just been a small step in his grander scheme of things, and it really did help during the battle, but that's about it. What about you, Jerry?
No, I think one of the coolest things we're getting in new canon is the kind of this idea that Palpatine is just constantly reaching and searching for he's trying to just get a monopoly on everything that is powerful in the galaxy and hold it down and like have these, like he wants to have these super weapons so that people will obey the government and stuff, so he can go and look for all of these insane powers. And I mean, he's after the Temple on Lothal. He's after things out in the unknown regions. We'll see what that. Maybe we'll see get a little bit clearer of a picture on that after Rise of Skywalker. But just really what you were saying, Brad. He really is. He's like we're saying, he's a busy guy. He's trying to get all these things in his grasp, and the Death Star is, I think, but a means to an end. Yeah, definitely. It's important. But it's only important in that it basically keeps people from trying to turn against the government he's got in place, so he can stay in charge and keep getting all this good power and all that stuff, like a good Sith should.
Definitely. I think a good thing to be brought up is he definitely has a plan for every little step of his process, and he even brings up like how only we can turn him to the dark side. It's an interesting statement, because I guess if Vader can't, then Palp will, or if Palpatine can't, then Vader will. It's interesting, and one thing I like is, we'll see it later, Vader doesn't want to hurt or turn Luke to the dark side. Like, you can just tell he is trying to avoid that as much as he can. One thing I want to get into after this is, it's a very small character interaction between Palpatine and Vader, but it definitely sets the standard, because Vader bows before him, and it's you can see, now Vader really is kind of like just another guy in this big battle too. He's not the ultimate bad guy. We see the ultimate bad guy. And then to kind of flip this interaction, you've got Yoda and Luke having a very similar interaction in Dagobah, but it's not as cynical and evil. One thing I wanted to bring up too in particular about this is, Return of the Jedi might have some of the best character relationship development in all of Star Wars. Like, there's a lot of scenes that I forgot about, especially prior to this rewatch, that had to deal with, like, Luke and Leia talking about something very serious, Yoda and Luke talking about very serious stuff, Vader and Luke talk twice about very serious stuff, Palpatine and Luke talk about very serious stuff, and then it's sprinkled in with silly Ewok goodness. But it's like, it's one of these movies that, like, I mean, Empire Strikes Back, of course, had great development, but it's nowhere near as personal as this movie might be. It's kind of like they took the Obi-Wan and Luke discussion from A New Hope, and they just repeated it so many times to make it just as intense. But with that being said, we are now on Dagobah, and I love the lines that Yoda here, says here, look eyes so old to young eyes, 900-year-old comment, soon I will rest, forever sleep, earned it I have, which I think is kind of cool. I just saw Doctor Sleep yesterday, and there's a lot of that in the movie Doctor Sleep. So, yeah, with that being said, how do y'all feel about this whole Yoda death sequence? Did it ever make you sad as a kid? I remember making me pretty sad.
Yeah, it made me sad as a kid. You never like to see the mentor die. I mean, he's lived 900 years, trains so many Jedi, and he's obviously very cute. At least in his old age, he's not as cute.
No, he's not.
I would say maybe if he were a little younger, he might be a little cuter.
Maybe.
I digress. But as I've gotten older, this might sound bad, but I start to laugh at the scene a little bit. Let me explain. So it's just kind of funny because it's just how the dialogue is. It's like every 5 seconds, Yoda's like,
Yes.
Luke. He's like, what? He's like, there's another Skywalker. It's like, oh, God, okay, that's it. Luke. Oh, what now? I left the stove on. Oh, turn it off for you. Luke. So it's just like every 4 seconds, he's like in some new revelation. It's like, oh my God, what's he going to say now?
Yeah.
So I laugh in that sense, but it is still very emotional. I think, Scotty, you mentioned that, I think it's definitely up there, this movie, in terms of the character relationships. Yeah. And I think the conversation between Luke and Yoda is very important. And, Luke apologizing for the fact that he left his training too early. And Yoda, says, you rushed to face Darth Vader. You were incomplete with your training, not ready for the burden, were you? And Luke is very apologetic about that. So it's very powerful stuff. Luke's owning up to his failure. And again, our heroes can fail and they can be flawed. Yeah. And that's just the beginning of that journey for Luke, because as we see later on in the saga, he continues down that path of failure. And I think that kind of stems from this interaction, even because
beautiful.
When do we get the resolution of that failure? When does Luke come around finally and be that spark of hope for the Resistance? It's when he talks to Yoda again in The Last Jedi. Yep. So it's almost like his whole life after this moment, there's something within himself that's incomplete. And it's not until he talks back with Yoda again for Yoda to be like, listen, failure is the best teacher. It's okay. You failed back then. I told you had failed. You said sorry. You're failing again now. It's okay. Again, you can just apologize and move on with your life. So this interaction, I think, does have implications farther down the line. What do you guys think on that in terms of how this relates even to the Last Jedi conversation, getting ahead of ourselves a little bit?
No, sorry, Jay, you go, bud.
No, I was just gonna say 100%. Like, the whole thing there, Luke is just distraught after we're jumping to Last Jedi, but he's so distraught that he feels like he caused Ben to turn to the dark side. It was his fault, these things, and so here we've got Yoda. I believe it's even Yoda completing his arc.
That's true.
We talked about in the Clone Wars how he was like, I'll be a general in this army, and it's I kind of don't really feel good about it, but I'm still going to do it. And then we've got Empire Strikes Back, where he's like, we're going to train you, and you gotta just be patient, but you have to kill your dad too. So, now in Last Jedi, telling Luke the greatest teacher failure is, you're going to fail, you're going to fall down, and it's okay. No, 100%, Brad. I think you're absolutely correct on this. I think it definitely connects to that. And it's just, I don't know, it's a great reminder that we're constantly learning.
Definitely.
Even as, someone as old and wise as Master Yoda still happens to learn new things, even apparently in the afterlife.
Yeah. And I think what I'm really trying to get at here too is imagine somebody you love, right? And that person dies in front of you, and your last interaction with them is you admitting to your own failures, Luke apologizing. That's got to carry with him for so long,
Oh, yeah.
So
Right.
he's turns into this almost perfectionist of everything has to be perfect. I have to train Ben Solo. I have to make him be a great Jedi like myself, my
Yeah.
mighty Skywalker blood. And when that doesn't happen, he goes back to this moment where he feels vulnerable and is like, I let Yoda down, and that's been haunting me ever since. And I've been trying to make everything perfect since then, and it's just not working. So I'm going to go hide. So I think that stems back to this conversation is what I'm trying to get at, if that makes more sense.
That's beautiful.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm glad you feel the same way.
Well, one thing I will say is I like that Luke is kind of in distress. He's like, Master, you can't die. But I love this next line that Yoda says. He says, strong am I with the Force, but not that strong. But that really kind of makes you question, is Palpatine that strong to not die in the Force? I mean, it's just the way it's phrased is interesting because that can totally be utilized later. And there's this next line that I love. I love it.
Yeah.
It's the twilight is upon me, and soon light must fall. Do you think that's metaphorical in its own weird sense to the Skywalker saga? Because then then the Snoke says, "When darkness rises, light is to meet it." When whatever I don't know the exact line, but twilight is upon me, and soon light must fall. I love that line.
Huh.
I think, I had the same thought, Scotty, about, not powerful enough in the Force, are you, for that or whatever? And I was like, oh, does that mean you can be? I think it could have some possible implications. I was trying to think, like, maybe he's just joking about that, but also, like, maybe there is some sort of level that you can achieve in the Force where it's like you're at that point where you can be immortal, and I think that's maybe what Palpatine's after.
It's paralleled again in TLJ where Kylo Ren says, "You can't be doing this. The effort would kill you." It's like how are you force projecting? How can you do that? You can't do this. Something that's making this happen. Same with this. If he's not that strong, he's strong in the Force, but he's not that strong. So. It's that idea of being strong in the Force is something that I've had debates with recently with some friends. Like, can you be strong with the Force, or can you use the Force to benefit you in different ways, which is something that we can totally take a deep dive once this Skywalker saga is over. Jerry, you have something to say? I could tell.
Oh, I was going to say it was, it could just be him too, like kind of making like just like a statement on the finality of death, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
right.
You know what? You can be powerful in the Force, but the one thing you can't do naturally with the Force, quotations around naturally, is not die or cheat death. And of course, in a way, Yoda and Obi-Wan and Anakin, they still taste death, but they still sort of retain their identity within the Force, which is kind of cool. So that's basically like them not dying. But I don't know. It's just to me, I guess it always kind of thought. I always kind of took it as that as like I don't know. Like maybe now that you're saying that, I don't know. Like we got to see what's going on with good old Uncle Palps.
Exactly.
But I think when you're the Force is in balance as it should be, you're not going to be able to get out of dying.
No.
That's all. In fact, in TLJ, where Luke tells Rey to, reach out with her feelings, and she senses light, darkness, birth, death, all that kind of stuff. All part of the Force, and so, not that strong, but also that would be pretty unnatural to try to do that, I believe.
Yeah.
In terms of this like meta foreshadowing that Yoda may be implying, especially in retrospect after we've watched a couple more Star Wars films, one thing I do think could be retconned in a way, I guess, is the line from Yoda about there is another Skywalker. I'm starting to feel, and I had the first thought of this today when I was watching, I was like, I wonder if he doesn't mean Leia. Like, I know at the time it's meant to mean Leia, but again, Star Wars is a form of iterative storytelling where it changes as you watch more films. So what came before has a different meaning. And I think especially when you look at this as a collective 9-unit saga, you have to remember that everything is all part of the same story. So yes, at the time, this only related to within this original trilogy, but now you have to relate it into the entire context of there are 3 more movies and this battle's not yet won. You know? So I'm starting to think that when he says there's another Skywalker, he's talking about Ben Solo.
Possibly.
And I feel like if we're calling the 9th movie The Rise of Skywalker, that Skywalker in that title is the one that Yoda is referring to in this moment. The Skywalker that we've for so long have been prophesizing about being another one is finally going to rise to really end this battle, because it couldn't be Luke, couldn't be Vader. It's got to be somebody else. It can't be Leia. I mean, because I know obviously the Carrie Fisher storyline has changed pretty drastically, but she chose more of a life of politics than the Force. So she's more of a military general than that. So that the expectation on her is not to balance the Force. It's got to be somebody else. And who else is left in the Skywalker lineage than, Kylo Ren and Ben Solo?
Definitely.
I don't know. That's just a thought I have. I don't know if you guys think that's a wild tinfoil hat theory,
Not at
but
all.
that's kind of my new headcanon interpretation of it, which I was like, I watched it today. I was like, whoa.
That's true. But then you bring up a good point, and especially what proceeds after this discussion. He says you finally get the confirmation that Vader is his dad, and the Force theme plays, and I love this. He goes, "Unfortunate that I know the truth." That's what Luke says. I forgot the line that precedes it, but it says this.
It says, he told you, did he? Something of being unfortunate. I guess I forgot the line too.
Well, the next line is amazing. Is unfortunate you rushed to face him. That incomplete was your training. Not ready for the burden were you. So it's cool to think that no, Yoda was not holding him back from saving his friends. It was holding him back from dealing with such a terrible reality that he is the son of Vader.
Right.
And it gives, like you said, Brad, watching these movies, you don't watch them in a vacuum. You watch them. You watch them as a 9-part saga, because if you watch it that way, it will change the meanings of certain sequences that happen, especially this one. You were not ready for the burden. I wasn't holding. You were probably a great Jedi, but I'm not holding you back because you weren't a great Jedi. I'm holding you back because you couldn't handle what you were going to be told, and that's another beautiful thing about these movies. You can kind of pick apart that way, and I love that it's weird. It's weirdly phrased, but Yoda kind of reminds Luke in this sequence that, like, you will only become a Jedi once you defeat your father. And I think it's just so, like, that's so not the prequel Jedi, which the prequel Jedi were wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe the Jedi have learned through trial is the only way to really achieve full abilities in the Force. But it doesn't seem that way now. Maybe Yoda dying is a good thing, because that old view of the Jedi might die with it. I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I laugh at the father thing because I'm looking at now, jumping a little ahead to the Obi-Wan conversation. Obi-Wan talks about killing Vader, and Luke says, "I can't kill my own father." And Obi-Wan says, "Then the Emperor has already won."
Yeah.
Which I found this really interesting. What does that mean? So you can't think about it in like a larger scope, okay, so in order to defeat the baddie, you have to kill your own father. Well, who's the only person in the entire saga who kills their own father?
Yep.
It's Kylo Ren.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and I was thinking about, like, why does it matter that you have to kill your own father? So in this perspective, like, yes, you have to kill Vader, I guess, to eliminate a second dark side threat. I don't know. I'm just having trouble grappling with this idea, but thinking about it from, like, the Ben Solo perspective, I'm like, okay, he has to kill his father because when he eventually goes to face the Emperor, like, what else does he have to lose at that point? Like, he's already gone down the darkest path he possibly can, and now he's coming back from it. So it's like, what can the Emperor really threaten him with that will really corrupt him, Whereas somebody like Luke, the attachment to his father could be his downfall. It's what leads him into the Emperor's lair. If his father's dead, he doesn't have that kind of attachment. But at the same time, it's what, like, the attachment is what wins the day. I don't know. This whole thing has really thrown my mind for a loop. It's really hard to
Brad, the point of these,
like, vocalize it. But
the point of these episodes were, and if you have the opportunity before The Rise of Skywalker comes out, go back to our episode dealing with Revenge of the Sith. I mean, that might be our most speculation heavy. It's weird. The third installment of each trilogy has been the heaviest in terms of implications, and Revenge of the Sith genuinely and just because how it's written has the most implications of the sequences that we might see occur in The Rise of Skywalker. And this movie too, there's a lot of phrases in here that can totally be that Chris Terrio and JJ could have totally heard just like we're hearing it and be like, oh shit, like we really can do something with this phrase. It's very beautifully done, and especially in this movie in particular. Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to.
Let me throw this.
Yeah, well, no, I want to hear it, Jake.
No, you're good. What were you going to say? All I was going to say was, let me just kind of throw this down for you fellas and see what you think about this. Do you think that Yoda and Obi-Wan were really... Do you think they really wanted Luke to kill... Do you think they really thought that that was the way to win, was to kill Vader?
Man,
Because
I don't
it almost
know.
looks like they didn't learn their lesson from Revenge of the Sith. What if they were trying to maybe put Luke in a position where he had to make a choice to where he finally, I don't know if this maybe takes stuff away from Luke or whatever, but like they put him in a situation where he had to make the choice, do I kill my father or do I not? Because it almost seems like when you get to the point in Return of the Jedi, and we'll get to it again, where, you know, the Emperor is like standing over him like, yeah, kill your father and take his place at my side.
Yeah.
You almost got to think that maybe they were just trying to put him in a position where he would make the right decision and actually not do it. Almost like they did a little inception on him, you know, like planted the idea of,
Yeah.
you know, like, tell him, you got to kill your father, you got to kill your father, to where he was like, no, I'm not going to. I'm going to win the most Jedi way I possibly can, which is to toss away my weapon. Again, we'll get there. I don't know how that hits you guys, if you think they were kind of leading them on there, if they actually thought that's how they could win.
I don't know. That's
Yeah, that's what I'm struggling with too, because I'm like, I don't know what good that does to kill your dad when your dad could be the one that helped turn to face the Emperor. I don't know. It's a tough one to swallow for sure.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But to move on throughout this scene, because this is one of those scenes, like on our last episode with John, Brad, we like talked about the Yoda interactions for like a solid hour, and this movie has a lot of those same like just heavy dialogue and quote ridden, you know, sequences.
Yeah.
And I love the Luke, when gone am I, the last of the Jedi will be. It's just Ryan Johnson said when he read and he heard that scene and he watched that scene, he like knew the answer. He just knew The Last Jedi would be the title of his movie, and I love that.
Right.
The Force runs strong in your family.
That's so good.
Passed on what you have learned. The best part is before he dies, Luke, there's another Skywalker. And just think about how heavy that must have been. 6 months ago, you just learned that your dad is this horrible, evil man, and then now you got a sibling. And, of course, the sibling thing in the next scene happens way more. And Yoda completes his kind of his thoughts from Empire. You know, there is another Skywalker. And Jerry, you wrote no retcon needed. What did you mean by that in your notes?
Can't remember. I think just that I think
It was so
it was
long
coming
ago.
off of what we were talking about with John, how it's like, you know, I don't know. Maybe I was thinking Leia. I don't know. It was I was very late on this past Friday when I was taking the last of these notes.
Yeah,
so.
I get that.
That's happened to me a lot here. Like I write notes and then I just kind of move on with it. Anyway, yeah. So there's another Skywalker. What does it mean? No, I think what I was thinking was just that like it's got to be Leia, but at the same time, I'm very open to whatever they want to, however they want to interpret it.
Yeah,
Because
like Brad said earlier. Like
they haven't let me down
Yeah.
with anything they've done yet. And like Brad was talking about earlier with this whole, maybe it is Ben Solo, you know, because he is a Skywalker. He's got Skywalker blood.
yes.
That's all that matters. I don't know. Like, it's all up in the air. And again, you guys, if you're listening to this after Rise of Skywalker comes out, then you know the answers. So just have fun with us, future people.
They might have more questions and answers maybe after that movie. Hopefully it's a lot of answers. One thing I thought was funny was before we get to the sequence of Obi-Wan showing up and talking to Luke as well, which is great character development and seeing that interaction occur, R2 looks at the Force Ghost Obi-Wan. He initially turns his head and is like, oh, and then Luke's like, what do you look? And he looks. I just find that kind of funny. Do you think that was do you think the Force Ghost can manifest to where most people can see it? Well, obviously not. Actually, at the end of this movie, Luke's looking off with his arm propped up, and he sees the 3 Force Ghosts that came before him, and no one else sees him. I don't know. It's weird. R2 definitely notices it, though. He, turns his head and is like, oh, shit, wait, that's old guy. That's Obi-Wan. You know?
Like, wait, he's back?
Yeah, exactly.
How did he get back here?
What do you think of that, y'all?
R2's like, what did I miss?
Exactly.
Right. I've always thought, like we have the line from Obi-Wan in A New Hope where he says, "If you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can possibly imagine." I think they can be seen by whoever they want to be seen by. It's not,
Yeah.
they can let anyone see them. Whoever they want. They can be seen by whoever they want. There you go.
Yeah.
They're just they can like manifest themselves. However, if they want just Luke to see them, they're gonna like show up in Bright Tree Village and just wave at him. Say, "Hey, we're all good here. We're all fine. How are you?" And if they want everyone to see them, then like they will. The Force
is as it wills.
Yeah, that's what I love that we're kind of taking back in the sequel trilogy and stuff in this new era of Star Wars is the Force is more mystical.
It is.
I like to think of, and I think that the reason why George kind of made it a little more scientific in the prequels is maybe he was kind of making a point of, if you really think too much about this stuff, you can really just start nitpicking at the little aspects. If you look at the whole picture is something more grand and mysterious. And
yeah,
I'm so excited to see more. But I think we're going to get more on Force Ghosts in Rise of Skywalker, possibly have Return of the Jedi. So I'm quite excited for that. And if they subvert my expectations, I'm cool with that too. So
pretty much.
Yeah. I think the only thing I'll have to add on just the Force in general, because I don't think we'll touch on it the rest of this episode. At least I don't know if there's many other references to the Force.
Not really.
But I want to see more interactions between Luke and Force Ghost Obi-Wan in the comic book run that's coming out. We didn't get that in the first comic run for Star Wars because it's before Luke finds out about Force Ghosts. So I think that will help us learn a lot more in terms of maybe who can and who can't see Force Ghosts, how Force Ghosts operates, and just what Luke is learning. Because obviously after 3 years, he's still battling with is Darth Vader really my father?
Yes.
So just a thought. I'm excited for that kind of storytelling. And yeah, again, I think it's important to know that in Star Wars, there's no science, there's no formula to the Force. The Force is as it wills itself to be. And I think that's the most important thing. I think back to that Freddie Prinze Jr. rant, and I bring it up all the time, is because it's not a video game. There's no skill tree. You don't have to get from point A to point C by going through point B.
Right.
You can get anywhere you need to at any time, and that's the most important thing about the Force. It operates the way it needs to, and that's the universe. That's life.
That's awesome.
It's like water. It flows through everything, and it flows freely and continuously, and that's that. So that's my only thing on the Force. It's not a level. It's not a video game.
Well,
that's it.
There you go, take it to the bank.
No, it's true, and I love that in this sequence in particular, Obi-Wan does some backtracking, and he tells the stories of the prequels again, and he says this line in particular: many of the troops we cling to. Many of the troops we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. So it's like, to me, I love that it's a pretty much a foretelling of what we will see in The Last Jedi, because we get 3 points of view. We get the Luke and Ben seeing the darkness within him. Then we get, Ben then seeing, the evil in Luke's eyes. And then we get the real telling, which is really kind of interesting. It's all forms of point of view. It all depends on our point of view and your point of view and the point of view of what we know is going to happen and what has happened. And I know, Brad, you probably can talk about this for hours because I'm sure you like the TLG for this reason. It's like this point of view thing is super huge in Star Wars, and maybe we'll get some interesting moments in The Rise of Skywalker that deals with the point of view. But yeah, I love that Luke is always learning lessons. Like, regardless of age, of time, of situation, he is always going to learn. He's the ideal student. He says to Obi-Wan, "I can't kill my own father." And this part, I always kind of, I didn't like it because you were our only hope. The other he spoke of is your twin sister. So it's a great tie into the prequels, that this kind of answered a lot of loose ends that the prequels left off in terms of chronological storytelling. But The Rise of Skywalker, I think, will open doors, and it will. I'm sorry. Revenge of the Sith is going to be the one that opens a lot of the doors, and The Rise of Skywalker, like I said earlier, in regards to the the third chapter in each trilogy, I think they all have their own chances of opening and closing certain doors on this. But I love the I love the reveal of Leia as his sister. I never thought it was silly, even as a kid. It makes sense. They're part of the same family feel. I don't know. They like are both look the same age. They both feel young. They both feel like Skywalkers. One is the headstrong version. The other one is the, like the more in command, logical version. I don't know. I think it's really cool. But the best sides of Anakin and Padme, and the worst sides of them too in their own right. But any thoughts on the Leia reveal? I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's appropriate. I think it's great to see Luke's moment of realization. I don't know if we're jumping ahead at least to that conversation between the two of them.
We will
but
shortly, yeah.
The look in Leia's eyes when she finds out, she's like, I've always known. Mm-hmm. And again, that's just the mysteries of the Force. You always kind of feel that there's something there, and that the Force does work in mysterious ways to point you in the right direction, the right paths, and Leia's definitely Force sensitive as we've seen in The Last Jedi. So it's always been there within her. It's just a matter of when it would awaken. And I think Luke definitely helped her to get to that point. And I think that conversation was handled so well. And, Han Solo coming in at the last second and kind of getting pissed off initially and being like, whatever, you don't want to tell me stuff, fine. Yeah. And then he walks away and he realizes there's more to this than there might be. Yes. I just need to be there for her. It was just a very touching moment. I really like all of that. It feels like a very human reaction to everything that's happening in that moment. And then a very heartwarming one at a moment where Leia just needs a hug. And I don't know. I just love the whole sequence and this whole reveal. One of my favorite parts of this movie.
This sequence in particular, that's awesome. I agree with that. Jerry, any comments to make on the reveal of him being him having a sister, and it being Leia of all people? Do you have anything you would want to add in on that in particular?
I think that I wrote in my notes there's kind of a look at first with Luke where it's like I made a horrible mistake or something, like Joe Bluth. Or I can't remember what I wrote that about or not.
Yeah, I think that was it.
No, I've been making comments on how it's like, it's a wonder that Lucas kind of played their moments that were slightly romantic as awkward as he did. Yeah. So it wasn't ever like, oh yeah, we really want this to happen. I mean, there was actually a big contingent of fans apparently back in the day who were really pulling for Luke and Leia to get together. I think I've seen a few.
Well, Spoiler of the Mind's Eye kind of breaks into that barrier too, if I'm not mistaken, as the story.
Yeah.
Which is.
But it was interesting for sure.
Definitely.
But I don't know. It's brilliant. I mean, there's nothing I can really add to it that you guys haven't already said. It's great. I can just make horror, or I could just make dumb Arrested Development references. So.
But with that being said, Luke departs from Dagobah, and one thing I do like is they go to the Rebel meeting, and not much you could say about it except for Mon Mothma's introduction's pretty cool, and Admiral Akbar being in there too, and the trio being back together, like really in their I guess their right place, not on Jabba's sail barge. I do love when they leave before they get to Endor. I love that there's a brief Force Skype between Vader and Luke. There is a bond there. There is a bond in the Force there, and I'm very happy that TLJ kind of took those moments of Force connectivity between Leia and Luke and Vader and like made it so much more understandable from a perspective. It's not quite as vague as this movie is, I really do dig that. I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting that the Force can manifest itself in that way to where, these people are either connected by choice or Vader's seeking him out. And Luke is so worried. He's like, I just jeopardized the whole mission, which he didn't, because the mission's not to stop the rebels. The mission is to get Luke to the Emperor, which in turn leads to the rebels being stopped. But that could be dived into a little bit deeper. Then we get to Endor, and I really don't know if we should break down each sequence in this. Anything in particular before Luke and Leia's conversation? We've got a lot of situations that happen. The speeder chase, the guy that looks like Rex. A lot of things like the Ewok introductions. I don't know. Does anyone want to say anything from those sequences in particular that they like?
Just all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole, like, when they first get there and everything, and the speeder chase and all that, like I wrote down that one thing I noticed was just that the chemistry between the three of them, even though Harrison may have been a little checked out in this movie, it was still enjoyable to watch, man. It was just a lot of fun to watch. Like hey, it's me.
I love that comment.
It's such a fun, just like Han, being buddies with Luke, and it's just everything you wanted since you've watched A New Hope and stuff. And here we are back together again. It was great. So I don't know. This movie's just chock full of it.
It is. What about you, Brad?
Yeah, I was gonna say one of my favorites is, keep your distance, Chewie, but don't look like you're trying to keep your distance. I don't know, fly casual. Like, just right off the bat, this mission is just gonna be
goofy,
full of hilarity and ridiculousness. And I mean, come on, Care Bears fighting the Empire. I mean, that would not fly now.
No.
But the fact that it happened, I know George Lucas originally wanted it to be Kashyyyk, and it would be the Wookiees taking on the Empire, which, holy crap, if that was the case, this movie would skyrocket in my list. Probably. I think that would have been really cool to see. But, technology and practical effects at the time are very limited. So in another universe, maybe that's the version that we get. But the Ewoks in general, I do love a lot. Wicket, Warwick Davis, we were very blessed to have gotten him in the Star Wars universe to be so heavily involved in what he's doing and hosting celebration panels and showing up in Solo to reprise his Phantom Menace character and appearing as Rook in Rebels. So, he's one of the greatest additions to the Star Wars universe that we continue to see great things from. And Leia's outfit in the Ewok village, I think, was very great. Just kind of see her embrace that side of herself. And, as opposed to the horrific slave bikini that I'm not a fan of. Again, we get her just to be very princess-like, but also embracing a natural side based on how the Ewoks wardrobe is. So just the whole sequence in Bright Tree Village and 3PO finally getting to be a deity, after all these years and all these languages. He finally gets his one shining moment on top of that chair, and that's another fun thing that the Return of the Jedi does.
Well, I do want to bring up Wicket, and Brad, have you had the opportunity to watch the featurette that was put out? That was like the Journey to the Rise of Skywalker with that was on YouTube. I think it came out this past weekend, and it was
it's like almost a behind the scenes thing, but it was I think it was what they showed before the Episode 9 panel celebration.
Yes.
So you
with added stuff coming.
You saw it. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but there is a shot in there that's revealed a returning character showing up in The Rise of Skywalker. Did you realize that or no?
No.
Should I tell him?
While you guys discuss, I will check it out now on my phone.
I'm gonna message it to you. Hold on, I gotta message it to you, Brad. Hold on. But no, I one thing I will bring up too in regards to Jerry, you actually wrote this. I want to hear what you have to say. You mentioned how it's out of character that after this whole entire sequence that Chewie's the one to act super animalistic. I don't know.
I mean, Wookiees, it's funny, Wookiees are kind of I almost feel like it's almost like people look at them like they're animals, but they're very advanced and stuff. And I just thought I've always thought it was kind of funny that Chewie falls for a trap, essentially a trap to catch a wild animal and stuff. But I mean, it makes sense because he is a Wookiee, and of course I'm sure he likes, I don't know, he's based on a dog.
Yeah.
So and stuff, but it's just funny with everything that we have. I'm almost the canon junkie, and he's but they're a very proud people, and so I get a little upset for Chewie in that scene, but I also understand he was very hungry.
Yes.
And I'm not really entirely sure that rebellion rations were very good for a Wookiee of his age. So
we're
always thinking with your stomach, Chewie. Come on.
That was so great. Don't get me wrong, I love it, but it's always just struck me as weird. Why is he all of a sudden just oh yeah, and I want to go for this wild animal trap?
I think we just saw a live reaction of Brad's realization of a returning character, and I don't think it'd be that much of a spoiler because I think they are going all out I sent it in the Bombadcast's Twitter page messages. What do you think of that, Brad?
Yeah. So spoiler if you're listening. Slight spoiler, I guess.
It's
Not really.
Slight spoiler. It's just kind of a confirmation of something everyone really
Hoped for.
I mean, was there any of us who didn't really like? We were all hoping that something like that would happen, right?
I got so giddy.
I mean,
just
we got
watched
the remnants of the Death Star too in this movie confirmed. So come on, you got to have run away if you don't want anything spoiled for Rise of Skywalker. We have, I think, a slight confirmation of Ewoks, specifically one Wicket.
Oh, it's so good.
Himself, a little bit more of a gray face, which is kind of neat if you like really look at that still.
Yeah.
And just that shot of Warwick looking up at that head.
Could you imagine how full freaking circle that would be?
Gave me chills, man.
It did, and I'm like, I paused it. I'm like, that's an old photo. It has to be. I'm like, no, that's old Warwick. That's Warwick Davis from Celebration. Like, that's not little kid Warwick Davis.
Trick you.
They
like to trick you because they're like showing all this stuff from the original trilogy behind the scenes stuff, but that was sneaky Lucasfilm and company. Very well done.
Well, thank you for blowing my mind on this Sunday night.
Yeah, well, good.
Isn't that crazy?
It's such a cool shot. But luckily, we'll get the return of Wicket.
I'm excited.
So that's going to be awesome. No, Brad brought up he loves how 3PO is. Oh no, was it Brad or Jared? I don't remember now. Brought up how they like how 3PO is kind of performed, seen as a deity, and I love.
That was Brad.
I love 3PO in the
scenes,
scenes, but I love Han and Luke bossing around still. Like they're like on caught on the thing, like they're like tell him this, tell him this, tell him that, and even before Luke and Leia talk, Han's like, we need more supplies and we need this. Come on, are you gonna tell him or not? It's just.
I know that's like so ridiculous, but I love that so much and stuff. I mean, come on. What's more Marvel-ish humor than that too? Like, I don't know. Not to get on that train again, but I don't know. Just like I love Han has so many fun quips in this movie.
He does.
And 3PO, man, hey, I think 3PO is about to get his due. Coming
totally.
Too, so.
Yep.
No one's gonna.
I would recommend Anthony Daniels' autobiography. I just finished it this weekend, and they do talk about that specific sequence in it with Han Solo and 3PO with the triple takes and what filming that part was like. But I would say it's a very good read in the lead up to this movie, especially if you think 3PO is going to have a larger role.
Oh, awesome.
I think this would be a very appropriate time to read it. So.
Excellent. That's good to know.
Very good. All right. I still wish he could have gotten them to call it "Telling the Odds." Like he wanted to celebrate that. That was a great title. But anyway,
No. We then lead into a very important sequence in regards to what this might imply for the future stories, and the son of Han and Leia. I think too. This is probably the first time you get a real personal conversation between these two characters. With Leia and Luke. And I really didn't think about that till recently, and Jerry wrote in his notes too. Leia really remembers Padme through the Force rather than a physical representation of what her mother was, which I think is kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
And the reveal of Luke saying that he is his father. I have to face him, and Leia says, "Well, why? He is my father." And I love this next line, how he's like, You're the Alliance's only hope if I die. And he says, you have that power. You have a power I don't understand and could never have, which is really so cool because it parallels what we see in TLJ of her floating through the air. And it says, you're wrong, Leia. You have that power too. In time, you will learn to use it as I have. This force is strong in my family. My father has it, I have it, and my sister has it. And it takes a second. Yes, it's you, Leia. And, and Leia's realization is not like, oh my gosh, Luke, no way. It's like, yes, I know. Somehow I've always known. And I think it's just beautiful. I think it's so beautifully done. And what it could imply for the overall saga is very, very awesome to see this interaction finally occur. Brad, do you have any words you want to bring up in regards to this scene in particular?
I think you hit the nail on the head. The only other thing I'd add is, those lines in particular. How awesome was it that we got that as part of the Force Awakens trailer?
It's the best.
For the second trailer at Celebration in 2015. So that was really cool to hear that line uttered, and again, like, we were wondering, oh, who is he talking about? You have that power too. Like, who could that be? Is it Rey? Is she a Skywalker? And that was the whole thing. But obviously, she's not a Skywalker.
Right.
But just to get those lines muttered again, I remember people were getting very excited when that whole the whole debacle happened.
Yes.
So good times, nostalgia.
It's awesome.
Absolutely.
Jerry, anything you want to say about that scene in particular?
I don't know, man. Just like you've been saying, it's so beautiful, and I love it. It really drives home the point that Leia does have the Force too,
Yes.
because she does. I've always known. Again, I wrote that she remembers Padme through the Force. We watching chronologically, we know that Padme dies in childbirth,
Yes.
so they don't get to know their mom, and it just, to me, it's kind of a beautiful. I love that Leia's connection to the Force is very. What's the word I'm looking for? It's very
Subtle.
empathetic and stuff. Or
It's more
sense
emotional.
other people.
Yeah.
She's more emotionally connected to the Force, to where like that's. I don't know. I feel like that's got to be like the reason why, because I think we have in canon. I think Brea Organa makes it all the way to A New Hope, if I'm remembering correctly
know.
in canon.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view, it's Eclipse.
Yeah. That's which
Worst
is
heart-wrenching story I've ever read.
that is a heartbreaking
revisit it.
story. If you guys want a good cry, go right now and look up Eclipse and from a certain point of view and just bawl.
Oh wait, that is a
Because
sad one. I do remember that now. Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of sad ones at the beginning of that one. My goodness. But I really just, I love, and they've kind of made the point of like, after A New Hope, Leia goes to like, she takes Evan Verlaine, and to save some of the Alderaanian people, she ends up going to Naboo for a little bit. And then even in the, after Return of the Jedi, she ends up going back to Naboo, and she kind of sees like little things of Padme and kind of knows like, has like a sense of, I know who that is.
Yeah.
And stuff. Like, yeah. So I think that's just kind of always been Leia's thing. She's very empathetic. Her connection to the Force, like we were saying, is a very emotional one.
It is.
So Ian is done so beautifully to really just drive that whole thing home.
Well, I think it kind of parallels to the TLJ conversation of like, they're just brother and sister, and it's an emotional bond. It's not so much it's emotional and spiritual, but it's not so much a friendship bond. It's very interesting. You never see an interaction of like, oh, we're buddies. No, it's more like I care for you, but I don't care for you in a love, in like a sexualized or loving kind of way. It's more of like we're in this together. We gotta fight the greater fight, and you see that in TLJ. It's like he's like, there's still good in him. They're so worried about Ben, and what that might imply later is very important. This same conversation is almost in its own weird way replicated again when Luke and Vader discuss, what they discuss in particular. So let's jump to that real quick. I love this, and it didn't dawn to me while I was just watching it, but when Luke and Vader are talking, after Luke turns himself to the Empire, he's not intimidated at all. Like, he's not scared at all of Vader. It's so cool. It's so powerful visually. And the line that Vader says, "The Emperor has been expecting you." And then, of course, Luke responds with, "I've accepted the truth that you were once Anakin Skywalker, my father." And I think it's so cool because it's all about Luke is like the whole time like hammering home like, no, you are still Anakin, like no matter what, like hammering that he's still a good person. There's still good in you. And it really kind of parallels Han and Leia's discussion in TFA, talking about the good in him, quote unquote. It's kind of cool that it's kind of riffed on in this movie in particular, and then TFA takes it to a different level. This one next line is very impressive. "I must obey my master. I will not turn. Then you will be forced to kill me." I love that Vader will not. I'm sorry. I must obey my master. It's just you see that Vader's now way more of a follower than he is a leader in this movie in particular. it is too late for me, son, is another line. So I think it's interesting,
Yeah, that's like the first line where he really shows
Yes.
or acknowledges any sort of weakness.
Yes.
Which is very telling
It's
because
very telling.
it more tells you that he's not turning because he's not willing. It's just he feels he can't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wants to. He just feels he can't. It's too late for me. It doesn't matter what I do.
It's huge.
So that just goes to show you. I think that was the only thing Luke needed to hear to be like, all right, we got him. Like, he's still in there.
Well,
he just showed his cards and we got the winning hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jerry, you bring up a very, very good point because this conversation seems Luke did a great job. He planted that seed in Vader. He's like, no, you're Anakin. Like, no matter what you say, you're still Anakin Skywalker. And Vader really doesn't attack or like show his evilness in this sequence. He's just like, no, I mean, the Emperor's gonna be your master and stuff. It's just how it's gonna be. But Luke is so much more straightforward. And like, think about Anakin, like prequel Anakin talking to his son. How like crazy that thought is. Like, that's the same man in that suit. We tend to think Vader and Anakin are such different characters, but they're pretty much one and the same in their own regard. But Jerry, you wrote something absolutely beautiful in the notes. Let me make sure you see it. It's that little highlighted section I just have on here.
Right. Well, it's like after, he says it's too late for me and all that, and Luke has that just brutal line of, well, then my father is truly dead. You just see I feel like you could, good on you, David Prowse, I guess, for being able to sit and look at it, but it just really feels like that's Anakin after the elevator door closes.
Yeah.
You can almost a facade like fall from Vader, and he's not Vader anymore. He's like sitting there like, what the heck am I doing?
Yeah.
What have I become? Like it's almost like the scales fall from his eyes, and he can see for the first time almost like I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I'm about to turn over my only son.
Yeah.
Right.
To this man who is brutalized and just
Made my life terrible. Yeah.
and just someone who has like kept me in anger and fear for 2 or 3 decades almost. It's just it's I don't know. It's kind of a beautiful moment of, like you said,
Clarity.
we get that first there, Brad, where he's like, it's too late for me, son. And then just that last final brutal line of my father's truly dead. It really, you can tell. I never noticed until this viewing, trying to really analytically watch this, that like, you just see it's, I don't know, his shoulders kind of like slump.
Yeah, it does.
He's Vader. It's Anakin Skywalker not sure of himself again.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Doesn't know what he should do. Stuck with a choice. And he's always stuck between a choice. Should I do this? Should I tell Obi-Wan? Should I join the Emperor? What am I doing? Who am I? It's just this identity crisis that Vader innately has, and it's very hard to watch in terms of the saga because it's kind of a sad sequence. It's very beautiful, Jerry. Didn't think about it from that way, that much depth.
Sometimes I have beautiful thoughts. So.
Anyone have any last anything they want to state before we move on to the great battle of Return of the Jedi?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think I'm good.
So this next,
I'm ready to get into this 3-way battle, man.
how I have it sequenced, I don't want to have to jump back and forth between ground, air, and personal Jedi battle. So I have a segment for our listeners.
George Lucas, we are not.
Yes,
So.
I have it segmented in regards to
It's very,
what
very
happens
faster, more
in
intense.
each. Jerry.
Hey, just keep reading.
Wait, did George Lucas join our Skype
Yes.
call?
Yeah, hi.
Wait, who let him
I
in?
just bought a new pair of Keds today, and I'm feeling really saucy. So.
Well,
Oh
saucy
God, it's a
George.
Collider deep fake.
Yeah. Oh no!
Oh God, I'm leaving.
Don't get angry, guys. Don't get angry.
Well,
I'm actually quite happy.
I like that. The Gungans make me happy. The Naboo.
Could use a few more Gungans.
One thing I want to bring up too about this battle, there's 3 huge cuts that happens each time. It's like between ground, space, and personal. So I want to kind of avoid having to jump. So we're just going to stick to each segment in the battle, starting with the ground battle. I noticed upon this reviewing in 4K HD, watching it, The Stormtrooper helmets are so different. Like the black mouths. I don't know if I'm a fan of them. And I love how easily this plan gets foiled by Han and Leia. But the saving grace, of course, is the Ewoks in this segment. I like how Rex shows up, which is a great retcon. That's like a positive retcon in the community. You know, like...
Yeah. I mean,
I would agree with that.
There's, I think some people are like, well, I think that's like a white guy or something. I understand. I don't know. It just really...
It looks like him.
It really looks like an older Tamara Morrison.
It does.
It looks like Rex from Rebels for sure. Nick Van Zant, or which sounds like a lead singer for an 80s rock band. But I don't know, man. It can be Nick Van Zant if you want, but I just really like that that's Rex right there. We know.
Yeah.
We know he was there, and Hera. Which is, that's a story.
I think it's another moment too where Star Wars fans can take things too seriously. It's like, you know what? This is a movie about space wizards. That can be Rex if you want it to be. If you don't want it to be Rex, it doesn't have to be.
Right.
Exactly.
But, just let it be what it needs to be. So I like the fact that it's Rex, and I love the fact that, Rebels continues. I don't want to spoil Rebels, but just the fact that it has some sort of lasting legacy within the Star Wars universe, and many of the characters that we grow to love do have some sort of continued story like a Rex. Yeah. And I think he was actually in Forces of Destiny, I think. One of those shorts. We did actually see the armored Rex with the Endor armor. I actually think he was interacting with Leia and Wicket, or maybe another character. I feel like that happened. I just can't remember off the top of my head.
I think you're right. Also, to jump to the end of this, almost the end of this ground battle, when the tides kind of almost turned. It's actually right before the Ewoks joined the battle.
Yeah.
And they've kind of the rebels and stuff. You'll notice that guy is wearing stormtrooper armor, and you can see the beard. I'm like, that's Rex, man.
Yes,
that's Rex. I'm wearing this junk armor. You know, like it's. I don't know. That's just such a cool thing. Plus, Brad, like you said, not to spoil Rebels, but it definitely has an impact on the galaxy, and I love that it's just like, we see the shot of that, what is probably just the same model of ship, but you know what? To me, if they reveal it or not, I'm just going to say that's the Ghost, because why wouldn't they be there?
Exactly.
Rise of Skywalker.
And why do you put that... Why do you put that ship in the trailer right there where it is? If it's not the Ghost,
everyone's seeing it.
Right?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, like I don't know,
baby.
Well, so Chopper's in there going like whoop. It's going crazy.
Dave Filoni
He's like, this shit again, really?
Stuff from
Oh, that's amazing.
Like we had Endor, we had Scarif. We're done with battles, Harry. We're done. No more. I want to go home.
Well,
awesome.
Well, one thing I want to bring up too is people forget you do see an ATST in the Battle of Hoth, though it's not quite as present. I love the ATST in these sequences in particular. It fits the scenery. It's perfect. And I mean, I'm sure it sold a lot of toys, but especially what we saw in Chapter 4 of the Mando, ATST is pretty beast. I'm not gonna lie. I know it's kind of a spoiler, but I mean that is it's in the Legos. You should have seen it by now. It's in the Legos, but like it is that is some cool stuff what they do with it. It's much scarier in the Mando than it's scarier in here. It's getting taken up by teddy bears in this one.
Oh yeah,
but I love that 3PO.
Hey, those are murder bears, man. Those are murder bears.
You're right. I'm sorry. I love that 3PO is kind of the diversion for the sequence, and I do love how George's take on this is how it's like it's kind of Vietnam guerrilla warfare. Like the less armored people are the ones that are the victors. The people that know the environment better. That's what all war really is. If you know your environment better, you're automatically the winner. And the Ewoks, even though they're murder teddy bears, they are far more advanced in regards to how to handle the environment than the stormtroopers are. And I think it's something that people can often overlook. But that's a pretty strong statement, if I'm going to say so myself. Very politically charged.
Home field advantage.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, if you're not scared of Ewoks, then may I suggest you go play Battlefront 2 Ewok Hunt? Get terrified out of your ever-loving mind. I mean, seriously, those things are horrifying, when you see them coming at you. I mean, come on, even though it's in the dark, you know. But I don't know those things. And even just watching this, I'm like, yeah, they're teddy bears, but just look at the faces on those things. That's like kind of freaky when you really think about it. When you're growing up, it's like Five Nights at Freddy's teddy bears, you know. Or something.
Yeah.
Some of them are a little wonky looking.
Yeah.
But you know, Wicket, our boy Wicket.
Our boy Wicket is
and there's
cute.
a ton of Ewoks that are just super. Anyway, they're on the battle. So I digress.
I love that R2 in this sequence as well tries to save the day, but then he gets shot. it's generally not what happens to R2, and this is like the first time you're like, oh damn, he can get shot too. You know, like he like gets shot and slings back, and his little chest plate opens up and it's like shaking.
Scotty,
Which, speaking to your point earlier, Scotty, about the sound effects of R2, this is one of his signature ones.
Yeah. Oh,
In
yeah.
Return of the Jedi, where we hear the overload of R2.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
love that.
great one.
What would you want to say, Jerry?
All I was going to say was, you know, you're watching the special editions kind of for the first time. This is very special for me. You really react to these things for the first time. But what did you think about the whole, I think it's a 2011 edition, actually. It wasn't in the 97 edition. What did you think of that Blu-ray edition of all of those different, like...
the weird ones?
Yeah. They really added a whole bunch of stuff popping out of him.
The original had, of course, the chest plates opening up, his headpieces opening up, and I think like 3 or 4 things popping out, his little arm popping out in the original version I watched, but that didn't sour me. And there's a lot of things I will bring up later that didn't really hurt my feelings as much because I'm a soy boy, apparently from our YouTube comments.
Hey man, give me that soy. That soy, man. That's some good. You know what? I'm more of an almond milk kind of guy myself. You know.
With that being said, it then cuts to the Ewok being shot, and like I wrote in the notes, Ewok's death is still super hard to watch. John Williams' music doesn't help, and it's a tragedy of war. I mean, that's really what it implies. And like, I mean, as a kid, I was like, that's dense. Like, I was little and thinking that's pretty sad. That poor little furry guy just lost his friend and was like, goes back for him, and his friend like doesn't move. And then he like hovers over him and cries. It's brutal.
Yeah, it's not even the fact that just an Ewok dies and just lays there. It's that there's one that's still alive and goes like grabs his hands like, come on, let's go. And he doesn't move. He goes back and just decides like, I guess I'm just gonna die here with you because. I see you, Brad. I see you shaking your head, man. It's horrible.
I can't even be involved in this discussion. I'm gonna have to go take a break, cry break.
It's horrible, man. Like George Lucas, you evil mastermind. You. What the heck are you trying to do to all these kids, man?
I like after this sequence, Han and Leia's team up, you know, and then Leia gets shot, and I love how worried Han is. It really kind of shows that character development there. You know, he's so worried about her, and Jerry always writes in his notes the Chewie Tarzan yell that's thrown in this movie, but then is used in Revenge of the Sith, and it's not stupid. I think it's pretty kind of.
And I didn't even write it like I just think it's funny to like remember these things sometimes and go like, this is pure, like I said, Saturday morning fun. You know, it's like we got our bowl of cereal, we're just watching Chewie like swing on a vine with some Ewoks to his belt. You know,
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars can be ridiculous. Yes, there is so much to dig underneath the surface with the mythological storytelling, and we can't get very serious about it. But at the end of the day, it's just as silly as this moment.
Totally.
I'm glad you brought this up. Something I often don't think about, but looking at it in the notes, I'm like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know,
and
like
they totally threw that in to like make the adults laugh too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably watching. There were Saturday morning serials of Tarzan, I believe, too.
Yeah.
Like black and white stuff like that. That's like he's swinging on a vine. It's Tarzan. So you know, we love this saga for the deep mythological stuff, like you said, Brad. But man, I love the weirdness. We love the weirdness and the funny stuff too.
Yeah,
so.
no.
Give us more weird Star Wars.
Well,
yes, please more.
Well, Bando's bringing that pretty hard with the Suka stuff. Like that was like weird, but we'll see that. That'll be brought up later.
Save it for Bombad Bounties, sir. Save it for Bombad Bounties.
We will.
Episode soon.
This next part's so incredible. I love the "I love you, I know" reverse. It's so good. It's so Lawrence Kasdan, so bookend. It's clever. And after that sequence, of course, they plant they plan the charges, which I think I wrote down, maybe it's not in the notes right now, but I wrote it down, but it kind of parallels when Chewie and Han plant the charges for the last time on another base later. Rip. Still hard to watch. That actually is harder than his death. They're like, we'll reconvene here or whatever he says. We'll meet up right here.
Detonator.
It's like just telegraphing that it's gonna happen.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
I'll meet you back here, I promise.
Like, hey Chewie, just want to let you know for no reason in general, I love you, man.
exactly.
Detonator.
I love that Han after that sequence, he's like, I'm sure Luke wasn't on that thing when it blew, and Leia says he wasn't. I can feel it, and it's that same Force bond from kind of a different perspective. And I love that Han is so jealous and he doesn't understand, and then Leia clears it up right after that. Jerry wrote in his notes how he kind of wait a second.
He goes through like a cornucopia of emotions while she's kissing him. It's hilarious because his eyes just go from like confusion to I'm really trying to put this together. Like you can see like the gif of like the math being done in like Galifianakis' head when he's counting cards and stuff, and he's just like, oh, whatever, man. Yeah. I won, so
it's great. It's great.
It's just that's such a great range of emotions. I friggin' love Harrison. I mean, I know he's checked out for most of this movie, but even at his most checked out, he's still good.
It is awesome.
Right.
Well, then to move on to the battle sequence, space battle part. I wrote in my notes, and I don't know if y'all have the same sentiment. The Battle of Scarif and Rogue One did a great job, but I think this is still the best space battle sequence. And we need something. We need this. And I think we're going to get it in The Rise of Skywalker, but I think we need this, but like 10 times the richness of like unbelievableness and like, how intense it was in the music. Dun, 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 dun. It's just like,
Now let's see how long you'll go.
God, it's so good.
It's so good. It's so delicious. Well, I think JJ watched this and the beginning of Revenge of the Sith and thought, what would be even better in this? Space horses.
Yeah.
So, I think that's all happening in atmosphere and stuff, but it's looking like we are going to get something at least impressive. So, more impressive than yet.
I think JJ's slipping in here saying, hold my beer,
Totally, I hope so, at
and
least.
I do think this will definitely... what's going to happen in The Rise of Skywalker will definitely mirror the final sequence in this movie in some case, because you're going to have, Ben and Rey fighting Palpatine at the same time, and then you have the entire Resistance fleet going up against the First Order, and then you kind of have that side mission like Han, Leia on Endor, but with Janna and Finn and their Orbaks on the Star Destroyer. So you kind of have this three-team sequence happening at the same time. So I do think we're going to get that kind of storytelling to, when you think about 2 hours and 20 minutes and fitting all this together, it makes the most sense from a editing and cutting perspective, which excites me. But then I got to wonder, what's the larger looming threat? My current speculative theory is, there will be some massive force event that Palpatine's trying to ensue rather than the super weapon. But watching this today on Return of the Jedi, I was like, wow, I can't wait to get this in a month, but like in a more digitized version and like with way better special effects and the characters I've come to love in the sequel trilogy, and it's just going to be so incredible. And the music, I like you said,
I hope we get a similar theme.
It's going to be the final hurrah moment for John Williams to just throw out all the punches.
With that being said too, Brad, I also tend to think like, in regards to the time this movie was released as well, this is still unbelievably impressive. Just like, it's like, I'm watching it, I'm like, how the hell did they make those models like turn and move when they did? I mean, I know it's all motion capturing, but like, it's like so fluent, and the Falcon like soaring between, it's like, it blows me away every time. It holds up.
It 100% holds up.
It's like the Battle of Naboo. It's like still that good. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just visually. And that's one thing that has to be stated. Space battles in Star Wars, though it's a staple of it, we haven't really had a really good one since the Battle of Naboo. Actually, I'm gonna be real with you.
Battle of Coruscant.
TLJ had a little bit of what you would consider, but The Force Awakens, I wouldn't even really more of a dog fight. But the Battle of Naboo was like the last like epic, huge space battle. I don't know.
Well, like you were saying, Brad, the Battle of Coruscant was like insane.
Yeah, but I'm thinking strictly like fighters like flying around each other and going crazy. You know what I mean?
They were kind of just like flying through the chaos of the Battle of Coruscant.
Yeah.
Right.
There's some cool canon things that Jerry wrote in here. How Nora Wexley's in the fleet and how the fleet comes together, and
specifically when they're flying through the superstructure, and man, let me get really nerdy and technical. They're flying through the superstructure, and what's it? They say, "Hey, break off and see if you can get a few of those ties to follow you." There's like an A-wing pilot and a Y-wing. We know Nora Wexley is a Y-wing pilot.
Good.
That she's that white. It's only, I remember this time I counted. There was only the two of them, the A-wing and that Y-wing.
That's it.
Dude and Nora Wexley.
Oh, it's awesome.
Split off there, which is kind of just it's cool just even, it means nothing to no one else. But if you've read the Aftermath series and spoilers for Resistance Reborn, if you love the character of Nora Wexley, I mean, it's just really cool to know that's her right there.
Totally.
Yeah, and let's remember, too, in that space battle, Poe Dameron's mom, Shara Bay, is in there.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
that's pretty cool.
Was she the one or was it Nora? I thought it was...
Well, Nora's in there, too. They're both in there. Right. So you got both. So actually, Shara Bay, I believe, was either in the space battle or on the ground in Endor, but she is involved in this battle somehow.
Well, she was in the space battle. She's an A-wing pilot, I think, if I remember.
Yeah, I think she helps Han Solo though liberate some of the Imperial bunkers after the Death Star blows up.
Right,
but that's a pretty cool thing to think about.
Was on the ground with Han, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's so cool to think that.
So, like, Poe Dameron's going to be fighting the good fight, like 30-some years later, the same fight his mom fought.
Oh,
and
man.
I don't know if we'll have any sort of acknowledgement of that, but who knows? I don't know.
Maybe he'll pick up his wedding ring that he's got around his neck and kiss it and say, "This one's for you, Mom," or something.
Yeah.
One thing I will bring up.
People don't like it when we talk about moms in Star Wars, though, so sorry.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Inferno Squad was also at the Battle of Endor, which is also a really cool thing to think about as well. That they were on the ground, and there's
a lot of crazy little canon connections there.
But anyway, back to the canon stuff. We get Wedge being Red Leader. I love that. Love that. And then Nia Nub and Lando having a thing in that whole entire sequence is really awesome. And one thing I thought was cool was that I think in The Rise of Skywalker, based on what I've like really zoomed in on the cockpit of that sequence of when the Falcon first pulls up, we're going to get Lando and Chewie now leading the great ending battle of what we think is going to be the end of The Rise of Skywalker. So I think that's very, very interesting. Yeah.
What is that movie even going to be?
I don't know.
Anyway, let's continue. We've been like speculating this whole time. So.
Yeah. No. So I love the, it's a trap comes after this. And I wrote Wedge is the GOAT. I guess I like Wedge way more now than I did before. But Wedge being in
Wedge has always been the GOAT.
Yeah. Man. No. Wedge, but in particular this, him after reading Resistance Reborn is just like, it's just so much better. I don't know.
It adds a lot more weight to that character for sure.
It does, and I think it's so cool how they set up how the Star Destroyers are really waiting for something, and I like how it's kind of brought up through dialogue. It adds a lot of drama to me. It adds a lot of weight. It's like, I don't know why there's so many Star Destroyers not moving and just waiting over there. It's amazing. I think it's really, really cool. But it's set up through dialogue, and then all of a sudden you get the space laser ignition, that whole sequence again from A New Hope with the pulling the thing and the and then boom and blast. And like the one cool thing, and it kind of looks silly and campy, but I like Nia Num's eyes when that part happens. It's like, whoa. Like
he's like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know what's so mind blowing about that too is like, you guys know that's like a hand puppet, right?
Yes.
Like someone was controlled dude in a suit. I never knew that until like this year. Like, how in the world is that Muppet like looking that good? I don't know. That's just crazy.
Yeah, it is amazing. I think there's a lot of tension in this space battle sequence, and I love that it's kind of relieved when Han destroys the shield, and the feeling of the whole entire space battle like really changes once that area is blown up. You know, it goes from feeling kind of hopeless, like Admiral Akbar's like, we got to get out of here. This is and you know, Lena's like, this is it. This is like our only chance. Like, no, we got to stay. It's really kind of cool. You don't see, we haven't had anything really like that in Star Wars in a long time. Like that tension being one side of the battle is not working out, the other one's working out great. I hope we see something like that again. But the suicide crash is one thing I wanted to bring up real quick, too. That is such a cool moment into the Super Star Destroyer, and then the whole thing goes down. You would think that it would be saved somehow else, but yeah, destroying the bridge is pretty significant, I guess. What do y'all think of that?
That guy's the true hero of the rebellion.
Legit.
Often overlooked.
Yes.
Definitely.
Very much overlooked, for sure. Yeah. That was, man, that is just such a cool scene, and you know, God rest Piet's soul, I guess. Like Admiral Piet, man, he was at least good for Vader, you know. He was able to avoid getting imaginary choked.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
yeah, good on him. He just couldn't evade that little fighter.
No.
Straight to the windshield. So.
And the one thing I will say is, while they're traveling through the superstructure of the Death Star, I really didn't take that many notes on it, but I do think the second explosion of this one is way more satisfying. Like, there's a lot more payoff. Like, I love the dogfight and the trench run in A New Hope, but I think, like, in the grand scheme of things, there's so much more payoff of, like, what it implies. Because this seems like the true end of the Empire after this sequence, you know?
Some more gratuitous, like long shots of the explosion.
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely.
It's like we really watched that thing die.
It's like really gone. But the cool thing is the fragments of the planet, you know, are now, as we know, being spread across that whole little system. So hopefully we'll get some more answers.
Man.
I know it's really kind of cool because in this version of the movie, it's not quite an explosion. It's just a puff of, you know, like bright light. You know, it's not like a. I mean, I guess it is an explosion.
Fireworks.
It's like a firework. It's more. It's not. You wouldn't think there's any remnant of anything left after that. But Battlefront 2 actually kind of dives into that before The Rise of Skywalker did. You know, they're flying through it, and it's all destroyed structures of it. So, Brad, you have something to say?
Right. I want to ask you guys a question. I want to settle this debate right now.
Okay, here we go.
What the hell is the name of this planet? I know it's called the Forest Moon of Endor, but in the Rise of Skywalker, we're getting this new planet called Kef Bir,
Yeah.
which is where the Death Star remnants are on.
Yeah.
So is Kef Bur, I think it's called, is Kef Bur the moon of Endor, and Endor is actually a different planet? Because this is like a long debate I've been having with people of like, what is it Endor or the forest moon of a planet called Endor that they're on?
It's definitely the forest moon of Endor, but what is that? It is funny that they're just like, it's the forest moon of Endor. It must not. I don't know. Does it have a name, or is it almost just like so inconsequential, and that's why the Empire chose there? Because it's like, oh, no one's even going to look for this place. It doesn't even have a name, you know. Yeah. Or maybe it'll be revealed in this. Maybe it's Kef whiskey or something, you know.
One thing I will say is if you look and you right after the explosion happens, the Falcon flies off screen. It's going towards the fleet. The fleet is over a green planet that has a very big oceanic area. So, like, I don't know if it's the... You know what I mean?
Wait. What you talking about, Scotty? I gotta watch this again.
Go. Literally, dude, I'm kid you not. Watch after the Death Star explosion. They fly back towards the fleet very briefly. It's maybe like a half a second shot. And I can actually, once we're done tonight, I will screenshot it and send it to you. But you see, like, what appears to be some sort of lake structure. You know, and they're flying. It looks like they're flying towards it in its own weird way. So,
it could be some sort of weird linguistics thing. How you say, like, you know, the county of X.
Yes.
Like when you're talking about your local counties. So maybe it's like the forest moon of Endor, but it's Endor, but it's kind of weird. But I'm just wondering, you know, how Kef Bir fits in all this. Speaking of the remnants of the Death Star, and that's the planet they're going to be on. So I don't know. It's just kind of cool that we're getting some more planets in that system if that is the case.
Yes.
And Endor is a separate thing and
Right.
a new planet.
Exactly. No. And then I guess to tie this whole little sequence up, well, I guess to answer your question, Brad, I think Endor is Kefbir, or the forest moon of Endor is Kefbir. I don't know. I would say that is going to be the case. If they were to retcon anything, that would be pretty straightforward. But the only issue is when I'm playing the old Star Wars games, it's like Endor, and it's that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like
Yeah.
even in
That's what I was thinking.
in Battlefront 2 for 2017's version, they might even say we're on Endor. So I don't know. I need to look into that now. That's interesting. Maybe I'm on the fence. Sorry. I thought I'd give you a straightforward answer, but now I'm like really thinking about it. Interesting.
From a certain point of view.
Yeah,
you know?
obviously.
Yeah, if it makes you feel any better, it doesn't keep me up at night, but that's the good thing.
We don't know that it might. One thing we need to jump into is, to me, one of the biggest scenes in the original trilogy. You can often credit the "No, I Am Your Father" as a huge scene, but in regards to the character development of Luke and the character development of Vader as well, and the redemption of our once fallen hero, this throne room sequence of Palpatine and Luke and Vader is like absolutely pivotal and probably one of my favorite things to discuss in terms of Star Wars. I just want to, before we even jump into the conversation, I know it's mentioned earlier, but we got to mention it again. We will get this same exact set, but destroyed in The Rise of Skywalker. Like, that's 1,000% confirmed. How freaking
Big yup.
It's so cool. That is so cool. I'm sorry. That is, like, incredible. I never would have thought a day in my life as a little kid that we get anything quite like that. It's amazing.
It is amazing with, like, especially with what the sequel trilogy hasn't. They've been, like, really, like, dealing with the heavy burden of the past, but they haven't really put a whole bunch of nostalgia, like, here we are, we're going back to this planet, or we're going back to this, which is totally fine. I've loved all the new stuff we've got to see. But it is kind of neat that, we're going back to this really pivotal spot for the galaxy. Also, again, shout out to that amazing leather on Palpatine's chair that never burns. So,
well, I mean, you bring up a good point. It's kind of poetic that we're going to return to what appears to be another pivotal area of the Skywalker saga, and we mentioned how Palpatine's little conference room is his little I guess his chambers really, in regards to where he confronts Mace and Anakin. Is a very powerful scene. It's a three-way scene, just like this one is also a three-way scene. And like I'd imagine in The Rise of Skywalker, we might get another three-way scene. So, I think that's huge. Like, I think it's humongous as in regards to the storytelling and paralleling all storytelling in these third chapters of these trilogies. I love that Palpatine.
Yeah, and I guess if we're talking about redemption too, that room has a certain quality to take a dark Skywalker boy and turn him back towards the light. Just saying.
Exactly. No, you bring up a good point.
that is a very good point. Very good.
And
point.
I think it's significant that his grandson's standing in his grandfather stood.
Yes.
Like that is really cool when you put it in that context, whether or not you're pro or anti Bendemption, but the fact that he's in that same room and could potentially have some sort of revelation about his ancestry and what really happened in that room. Maybe that's what they're talking about. Maybe Rey's telling him, hey, in this very spot, your grandfather became Anakin Skywalker again. And you can become Ben Skywalker from Kylo Ren. So that kind of conversation is what I like, the level of dialogue I hope from this scene. And and just it'll be so
even
good.
if we don't get it,
It'll
still be a scene that is remembered because of the implication of that room. I never thought about it from that way. Man, I'm just dying to see this movie. It's only 18 days from now. I can't believe it. It's so close.
By the time this comes out, like 17 days. So
man,
I don't even know how to function. I can't think of anything else.
I'm trying. I'm literally going to be dying at school tomorrow. I'm not ready for it. With that being said, the guards leave us. It's kind of a parallel to the opera scene. Leave us. And they just get up and they're like, okay, yes, sir, we'll leave you. Now I love this. I did mention this: Luke, Vader, and Emperor Palpatine being like a trio that. You forget how cool that is, and maybe we'll see it again. It's always been Anakin and Palpatine, and then another addition of a person. So it's cool. Your overconfidence is your weakness. Your faith in your friends is yours. Or that's a kind of a good wreck, Palpatine. I'm not gonna lie. He has so much faith. Luke really does have so much faith that his friends are gonna win, but that might not be the case, and it actually isn't the case until some clever trickery happens, and it's the Ewoks that end up saving the day. Which, did Palpatine plan for that? Because he is a master planner. Was he ready for the Ewoks to rise up?
Even though he's a master planner, he also, you constantly see that guy having he's just a good tap dancer.
Yes.
He's like kind of tap dancer on this situation. Like Padme back in the day needed to go back to Naboo and stuff. Okay, I can make this work. So, he's you just really see the overconfidence in him, and he just really sees. To me, that line isn't like him, maybe getting a good dig in it, Luke, as much as it is showing how far gone this person truly is. That they believe that friendship is a weakness. That because you care for people,
that's true.
That's a weakness.
Ooh, that's good.
How dark this guy really is.
Wow.
He is the ultimate. He's the devil incarnate in this series.
Yeah.
So.
Damn.
Yeah, this is coming from a guy too who killed his own master.
Yes.
He really does not care
at all,
and he still doesn't care because in the trailer he says your coming together will be your undoing. So he
Which
still
doesn't make any
thinks,
sense, but to him
right.
it's like he sees that as man, now you're all in one spot. I can just
Right. I'm like, but dude, did you just see the coming together of Luke and Vader was your undoing?
Yeah.
Why are you saying that? What are you missing in this formula? So that to me says he thinks he has it planned, or he thinks maybe Palpatine thought that orchestrating the coming together of these two characters would be their undoing, but he's missing some sort of X factor from this whole equation again.
Right.
That's just going to be his undoing once more.
Yes.
So it's going to be exciting to see what that is this time around. But certainly for this, this scene, Luke being so overconfident was helpful, and because it really did lead him to the right place to believe in his father, and his father couldn't even. We get so many shots of Vader just looking at Luke with no dialogue spoken, which I think is very powerful. And it just goes to show Vader's kind of realizing what the hell, I put my boy through so much and he still thinks there's good in me somehow.
Awesome.
This is saying a lot. What am I missing about myself right now? And, he even tells him at one point, it's pointless to resist, son. Ooh. But I think that's him trying to be just give up. I can't even deal with what's happening right now. I just don't want to give in to the light side again. Just give in yourself.
Yeah.
I don't want to confront this and within me.
Well, I want to ask all this because it's the next question I want to pose is Rey and Kylo, are they ready for this? Are they ready to interact with Palpatine? Are they prepared? As characters, do you think they are truly ready to face this challenge that is such an evil deity and such an evil character that we know that have caused so much, downfall in the galaxy and pain for a lot of people? Are they prepared to face this guy? What do you think?
Oh man, quite honestly, I think Rey is gonna chew this guy sideways.
Possible.
Just the way she even talks back to Snoke. And Snoke was. We thought he was a bigger threat, but clearly not. I just am so excited to hear Rey and Kylo have interactions with Palpatine because that's just whoever thought we were going to get that.
Exactly.
But Rey's that character who is never afraid to kind of go at the darkness because she's not tempted by it. So I just feel like she's gonna call him on his bluff.
Yeah.
You're just a sorry old man, and I just feel really sorry for you. And then Palpatine's gonna cry, and that's gonna be truly what ultimately saves the galaxy. So
Palpatine turns.
Yeah, Palpatine's you're right, Rey.
I think it depends on what happens in the first or second act. I think if Rey goes through some sort of confrontation with the dark side to understand that area of the Force a little better, then she'll be more prepared. But if she doesn't acknowledge it at all, which is part of the Jedi's issues, where completely ignoring and subduing the dark side teachings, that's what led to their downfall of somebody like Anakin Skywalker, who was getting inundated with it all at once. So then he turns. But if Rey can somehow dabble in it and learn about it, whether it's through Dark Rey or whether it's through working together with Kylo, I think she'll be ready for it. I think Kylo's definitely ready for it. I think the fact that he's been through the ringer, he's killed his own father, he's killed his own master. How much more like suffering can you have?
That's a good point.
You know, so he's at like the bottom of the barrel right now, and he's not. I mean, there's no more area they can go down. It's only up from here, I think. So he's prepared for anything the Emperor could throw at him.
Wow.
But I'm just so excited to hear Ian McDermott say Kylo Ren. Oh, like that's gonna be so cool.
Or Ben Solo.
But like Ben Solo.
Well, they'll say Kylo Ren very mockingly, because that's the thing with like all these big bad guys. They want to make fun of him for trying to have persona, right? You have to hide behind a mask.
Exactly. You know? This ties in perfectly to the next portion, though. This is where, to me, TLJ is like a love letter to this movie and what's come before it. You know, it's this same exact sequence where Snoke is forcing Rey to go look out the window. Look at your friends; they're all being destroyed. What can you do about that? You know, and same thing. Palpatine's like, look at this. This is your mistake. You caused this to happen. You know, I love it. It's such a good parallel. And I want to say this too. I think Revenge of the Sith does. You know, Revenge of the Sith does a lot of like characterization for Palpatine. Where this movie kind of like wraps up a lot of what we know about Palpatine as a character. I love that Luke also being angry fuels Palpatine's strength, I feel. Like his, like, Palpatine, like, you can tell he's, like, living off of it. He's like, yes, you know, be in your anger. And I love how Mark Hamill really does convey this so well, like this worried look. And one thing I want to bring up that Jerry and I brought up in the last episode as well, Mark Hamill has to do some crazy acting. Like, I don't care what anyone says. People might say he's a bad actor, but he acts with pretty much a trash can and an Oscar award for most of the first movie. Then he has to act with a puppet and a trash can for another part of the movie. Now he has to act with a man in a big mask suit and a man covered in makeup, like prosthetic makeup to the nines. So, like, just a real quick, I guess, rant on Mark Hamill. I think he deserves way more respect towards what he had to go through in his individual scenes. But I guess with that being said, I do love this next line. There is no escape, my young apprentice. I think we will get this line again. I think they're going to use this exact same line in The Rise of Skywalker. Just to, like, bring someone to the dark side or make them feel like, oh, man, he might be influencing me. You know. There is no escape, my young apprentice. It's beautiful. What do y'all think?
And I think there's going to be some weird Force stuff going on with Palpatine in terms of visions and possession. Yes. All these sorts of like really dark side things he's like pulling out. Because when you think about it, he's been looking for artifacts this whole time, and that was part of his contingency plan. So he's really going to pull all of that stuff out of his hat. And I think, you know, there is no escape kind of frightens me in a way. When you say it in that context, because it's like there is truly no escape. Like, how can you escape your own mind when your mind is turning against you?
Exactly.
You know, like that's the kind of like mental aspect of the Force I think he's going to use to his advantage, and that scares me rather than just a physical manifestation of it through, you know, Vader or lightning.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff scares me.
Jay, you have anything on that in particular? Because I have something I want to say.
Just that, you know, I'm always big on harping about Palpatine really putting the emphasis on the dark side being a pathway to many abilities some would consider to be unnatural. That scares me. It just really gets your mind racing. Like, what does that mean? Because things being unnatural can really make you feel unnerved.
Oh, it can.
So I'm excited to see. We are going to see the full, I think, scope of the dark side in this coming movie, but that's all I really got for that right now. But
Brad, you bring up a good point. You mentioned beautifully that, like, he's in his head, you know, like Palpatine's like, you know, would you, you know, use your anger, you know, and the worst part is this is a pivotal part of Luke's role. Anakin fell completely to the dark side because he wanted to save the ones he loved. He used his anger all the way to save Padme. He used everything that he could to save Padme. Where Luke, he uses anger in bursts, okay? And we know that Kylo Ren is trying to use his anger, but it's also fueled by his love for certain people as well. And it's a weird thing to say, but like Palpatine finds a way to get inside each character's head. He kind of get into Luke's head, but only for Luke to realize something later in this battle. And so when, of course, Luke kicks Vader and he kicks him on the stairs and they fight for a little bit and he goes, "I will not fight you, Father." And he like puts his lightsaber to the side. And I love that Vader is very sneaky as a fighter too in this movie. He like, the second he puts his lightsaber down, like Vader immediately ignites it and goes to strike Luke, and Luke defends himself. I do love this line that Luke says to Vader, because it's very huge to me in regards to the Skywalker saga. "You couldn't bring yourself to kill me before, and I don't believe you will destroy me now." It's like, that's pretty heavy. That's like really heavy in regards to Luke's character and how much he's realized, how much more he's matured, because he's obviously had a reflective moment where he's like, man, he didn't kill me then, and he could have killed me in Cloud City, but he didn't. What do y'all think of that? Do you think Vader was ever going to kill Luke, his only son?
I don't think he ever really could have done it, but you really wonder what he would do to really win favor with the Emperor. I don't know. I think Luke is correct. I think that deep down, Anakin, I don't think he could have done it. That's like his final link to Padme, which was the whole reason he turned to the dark side was to save her. So, and we now know in canon that a lot of his time when he's not doing things for the Emperor was spent in his castle trying to do natural force stuff to bring Padme back. And so that's just, I don't know, a lot of crazy stuff going on in that respect, but I don't think he really could have. Brad, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about Vader all through the years until he found out Luke was his son, there was really nothing for him to live for. And once he finds out he still has a kid, then there's something there. There's a glimmer of hope. And Anakin Skywalker kind of starts to slowly and surely come out of the woodwork. Vader's facade, I forget which one of you said, you mentioned like facade earlier, the idea that he has this on him, but it's starting to get cracked away and like an egg, and inside the egg is the true person. So I don't think he ever had any intention of killing Luke. I think Vader is just as confused as Luke is, probably, and I'm hoping that's something that's explored in the comic series that are coming out. What is Luke and Vader dealing with post Empire Strikes Back? Vader just having had the denial from his son to join him. That's got to be pretty disheartening. So I think Vader fully planned on. I think he didn't want his son to turn to the dark side. I think he was trying to kind of figure out how they would go about that battle finally, but he was more relying on Luke to kind of initiate that sort of moment or action, and then he would follow. It just took him a little bit to get there. Old habits die hard.
Well, the reference you made of the egg cracking, you can almost see that literally from Ben Solo's point of view, and like it took so much for him to finally accept that he is not going to have to wear this mask, only to then in this movie, which I can't wait to see why he chooses to put the mask back on, but like it's a cracked look. He's broken as a character as well. Just like these Skywalker men, all of them are essentially so broken. The only one that's a little bit more grounded than most is Luke. And I think that primarily comes from Luke's childhood being a pretty normal childhood compared to most of the men in his family. But with that being said, it gets to the Palpatine, good. And it goes to the classic Luke, who is by nature a pacifist. I will not fight you. And we see that again in TLJ. He does not do any fighting. He is simply there as a distraction. And the only time Luke does this fighting is when Vader brings up, especially for, sister, you have a twin sister. And I know Jerry loves that scene. You've always talked about that scene. Even when we first,
Love that whole thing.
when I first met
Love
you,
that
you
scene.
brought up like that's one of your favorite scenes. Why do you like that so much?
Just because one big part of Star Wars that I've always loved is the whole focus on family.
Yeah.
And whether it's your actual blood family or found family, things like that, there's a sense of community and togetherness and finding your
Yes.
people and who they are. And I really love that. And what this scene says to me is, you know, even though Luke and Leia are actually blood related, they started out as found family.
Yes.
And just this is like the culmination of everything they've been through. It's kind of like the last straw. You know, Luke is really trying to be good. Like, he almost strikes down the Emperor, but Vader from doing that, which I think is interesting.
It is interesting.
You know, like, you just have Vader trying to call him out, whether, you know, who knows, maybe, is he trying to turn to the dark side? I think he's still like, look, I don't know what I want to do yet. But it's that last straw of, you know what, if you're not going to turn, then I'm going to go get your sister. Like, no. And that's when his anger just, like, reaches its point. He's, like Wreck-It Ralph, his passion bubbles very near the surface in this scene, so...
That's a good thing to mention. Brad, do you have anything in particular that you would like to bring up about this drastic turn? You know, this Luke being a pacifist to being like, I think real quick for me, I think it's like Luke's only attachment that's the good in his family is his sister, and he loves Leia as a person and as a sister too. Now, I think when he's like, I'll turn her, it's like, you can't take that last thing away from me, because you got to think Luke's lost everything at this point as well. Just like Vader's lost everything, just like Leia's lost everything, just like Ben will inevitably lose everything later. It's like these Skywalkers have such a struggle with losing everything for themselves, everything they held on close to, and I think this is the last string for Luke. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, it very much mirrors Anakin's fall too. I mean, Anakin feared losing somebody he loves, so now Luke's going through that same thing as well, and we see him nearly give into the dark side and go down that same path as his dad, and it's not until he realizes that he cuts off his dad's hand and sees the wiring underneath that, hey, they're more alike than you might think. We're both more alike than I thought. You know, like father, like son, like I'm continuing down that same path as my dad right now, and I think that's a very powerful moment to throw aside the lightsaber and say, you know, I'm a Jedi like my father. I don't care that, you know, you're threatening my sister. This is all going as the Force wills it, and things are going to work out. She'll be fine, but I'm not going to sacrifice my own morals and values to protect her like my dad did.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, he threw aside everything that he knew about the Jedi's teachings just to save somebody he loved, which is the wrong way to go about it. And you know, it very much mirrors too, like The Last Jedi with Luke holding the saber above Ben Solo.
It's perfect.
How he's holding it above his dad. I mean, the reason that shot was put in the movie by Rian Johnson.
It was framed perfect
on purpose.
Oh yeah, it was framed. He had just acknowledged it like a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, that they framed that scene literally perfectly for that exact reason. And it's then I want to, real quick, I don't mean to stomp on what you were saying, Brad, but that is literally my favorite scene in all of Star Wars. It's like this realization that, like, I am so close to being like this robotic man before me that is my father. Like, I don't want to be like that. And Luke always has this realization of, like, I can't do this. And of course, this is when Jerry loves to bring up, he casts his saber to the side. No, I'm going to be like a Jedi like my father before me. And then Palpatine goes from being like, you will join me, to being like, I see how it's going to be, and goes to kill him. You know, it's a huge switch. And the thing I love the most, it's so hard to watch almost, is the Vader's like his like chest. You know, I can't even do the voice, the sound of it, but it's like that wheezing, and he's like holding his other hand up, like, please don't strike me. It's like this character you're so used to seeing being the big baddie, and like you're scared of him being so weak and feeble. I mean, he's an old man, you know. It's realizing that anger is only all anger you will ever deal with, unless you're a bitter person, is always passing. Anger should never be something you even as an individual, as a human being, you should never dwell in anger because you can't live with it. You know, it'll only ruin you. It'll only bring negative consequences, and I think it's a huge life lesson that people, you know, obviously the fandom hasn't realized yet. You know, with the fandom menace and everything else that's come in. You know, like you can't be angry at this stuff. It's not gonna make you any better, any happier, any more. I guess any more that you realize that just being angry in general doesn't help. And I think that's when Luke's like,
Right.
wait a minute, this makes sense now. I'm not going to be like this man that I just defeated before me. But any thoughts on that real quick?
Yeah, I gotta say it's a little bit ironic that specific group of people go against everything the Jedi stand for. So, you know, that's my thought on that, I guess. They seem to think they understand Star Wars more than most people.
Exactly.
And it seems to be quite the opposite because you're literally getting into anger.
It's
so
true.
Anger and fear and hate. Anyways, but, you know.
Jerry, any thoughts on the hand realization moment? Because I think it's a huge moment.
It really to me mirrors his failure in the cave in Empire.
Wow, yeah.
So that's really the only thing I have to add to that. Is you guys have really just kind of so eloquently dissected that. So, but yeah, it just really kind of reminds me of that. I think he's at that moment looking back, like to his failure at the cave, and like, oh crap, I'm about to do it again.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it's also the implication that they both have robotic hands. Because, like, it's almost one step further.
Right.
Like, my hand is also like his hand, and that's my dad, and I don't want to be like my dad, you know? Like, that his ignorance is inevitably what led to him having his hand chopped off, right? That is literally what led him being ignorant and leaving and not completing his training is a reflection of then later seeing his dad also being ignorant. And I think it's a huge thing, and hopefully Ben or Ray or whatever the situation is, they'll learn from that experience. But he will become his father if he lives in the dark side. He doesn't. And we know that when Luke passes on, he is nothing like his father. He actually is the probably the most true to the Jedi name we've seen so far. I'm a Jedi like my father before me, and the Force theme plays. And the Force theme is not used that much in this movie. It's maybe used 5 or 6 times. We get movies like the sequel trilogy tends to make the Force theme this like every 7 minutes we get the Force theme somehow, you know? But this movie is it must mean something. I don't know. I love the
Plus, you get my favorite Palpatine line after that. I'm a Jedi like my father before me. You know, and he goes, "So be it, Jedi."
Yes,
like the way he's so great. But we'll see. My favorite Palpatine line may change come 17 days.
Well,
from now.
this can be brought up too. It's "You fool! Only now at the end do you understand." Jerry, you love that line. I know you've used that line on the show a couple of times too. It's
it's just a fun one to say in a Palpatine.
Yeah,
voice. It's just like young fool, you know.
Yeah.
So
I love also this line. Palpatine has such good one-liners. "You have paid the price for your lack of vision." Ooh, it's like
this dude. It's just it's a dude who thinks he's got it all and just thinks that feeling for other people and loving other people is a weakness. So
but I love this next parallel is huge for this final scene is the Luke asking his father to save him. Father, please," and he's on the ground and he's shaking back and forth. And the line that Palpatine then uses, "Young Skywalker, you will die." I just hope we see, young Solo or young Rey, you will die. It's just,
How many of did you guys see the TV spot you saw the TV spot with that came out on Thanksgiving with Duel of the Fates and Imperial?
Yeah.
So you heard that Palpatine dialogue then, correct?
What was it? I don't remember it.
It was, "This will be the final word in the story of Skywalker."
Yeah.
So, there's that.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that scene.
Yeah.
He's talking to Ben Solo. Oh, gotta love it. Gotta love that.
Dude,
we had
I'm so
before I guess I want to move on just briefly to this next part. when Vader's head turning is happening. But I don't know if you ever noticed this, but on our Revenge of the Sith episode with our friend Eric, he brought up how this head turning, between Vader and Luke, this realization happens literally exactly the same exact. It's framed a little bit differently, but it's exactly the same way Vader looks at Mace and Palpatine, when he's like stuck between a choice. And I think in this moment, Vader realizes I've got to make the right choice this time, or I got to make the noble choice this time and save my son. And I told Jerry, I like the no sequence a lot in this part. Apparently that's a complaint, but I really liked when Vader lifts him up. He's like, no, no, and then he throws him. I think it's pretty damn good. But what do y'all think of that whole moment of obviously Vader being conflicted, knowing what is right and what is wrong, the idea of redemption? I know Brad has a pretty strong stance on that. What do you think, Brad?
I mean, the essence of Star Wars is redemption. You look at every single character and each of them have their own redemption arc. I mean, why have a story to, at the end of the day, tell us you can't change no matter what you try to do and you can't get any better? What is the point in that? That doesn't help anybody.
Not at all.
And we just talked about 5-10 minutes ago about leading a life of hate, and like how that is bad and unhealthy to do. So if we're saying if you're leading that life currently, you can never get better than that. Sorry, that's how you're going to be the rest of your life. No, the message is you can get better. Yeah. So what Vader is going through is to say, we've all had our dark side in our life. We all had moments that we're not proud of. We've all had journeys and turns that we're not proud of, but there is a path that we can take. It's always the choice to change the outcome. We can't change the past. In some way, I think of Kylo saying, kill it, which to an extent, sure, kill the past in terms of, don't let it hold you back from changing, but also the fact that you also have to acknowledge the past to not make those same mistakes. So it's kind of like a weird push and pull on that front. But for Vader, I think he's definitely thinking about his past in some way and what he's been through with the Emperor, but also realizing he has the chance now to change the narrative and also save his son. Yeah. So that's why he tells him, you were right about me. The whole time I told you it's too late for me, son. But now he's saying, you were right. It wasn't too late. I can always change. I can always make that choice. And I mean, that's what Star Wars is about. I could go on this for another hour. I know we don't have that time, but redemption is the most important thing in Star Wars. And I would really thinking otherwise is a misread in my opinion, but that's just kind of my tea.
That's beautiful. No, I love it. I love that little, I mean, you bring up a good point in regards to redemption. It's everyone might have their own subtle moments, and hopefully in Rise of Skywalker we'll get something very interesting, maybe a play on it a little bit. Jerry, any perspective on this redemption of Vader?
Just that what really can you add? I'm just ready to see Ben Solo come back to the light. In the new story here, so I don't know. It's just something that they've really, now that I've watched the movie with these kind of analytical eyes, it's set up.
It is set up.
So far into the beginning of this movie, and even maybe a little bit after his confrontation with Luke on Cloud City. He kind of. Like, he doesn't choke anybody out. He just kind of goes like, that kind of sucks. I don't know. It's just kind of the culmination of all that. Well, totally. So
no, you bring up a good point too. It's this idea has been rooted in especially Ben Solo's story since The Force Awakens. There's still good in him. I feel it. It's said in each movie. And if we just base it off the movies, they've been setting it up a lot. So maybe we'll see something interesting occur. Especially with this next part too, Palpatine falling to his death, quote unquote. I don't know what you think, Brad. If we can all state just a short statement as to what we think Palpatine's going to go through, or why and how Palpatine's still around. I'm under the umbrella that he transferred his spirit into Vader's mask, and he had to kind of be activated to be brought back out into this world. But this is all huge speculation on my part. Brad, in regards to that Palpatine coming back, what do you think?
Yeah, I love the Vader's mask theory. I was thinking today as I watched it, I think those blue flames that come up when he falls down that shaft is, I think he's maybe transporting himself into the world between worlds. I think he's finally like pulling out that last ditch effort of like, I don't want to have to do this, but I have to at this point. I have no other choice.
Yeah.
So he kind of enters that world, and it's very reminiscent of the blue flames that we see him use to try to enter that in Rebels.
Yeah.
So to me, that makes sense. And then maybe, this contingency plan is him finally coming out of that at some point once he's ready to take on the light in the dark.
That'd be wild. That'd be huge, especially for overall canon. It would make people want to go back and watch Rebels again. Jerry, what do you think?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I kind of lean towards that too. Just whether it's that or that he really did figure out the way to cheat death, and we're gonna see, like, I don't know, some kind of whatever they do. I know everyone has the rumor that they're like, I hope it's not this because that'd be dumb. That's execution is key on all this, and so whatever they do, I just trust what JJ's putting forth for us here. And so, but I lean towards doing some kind of weird force trick like that for sure.
Definitely.
Flames are definitely
interesting.
They tell a story. What about you, Scotty?
Yeah, with the helmet thing, really, that's where I go, and maybe a Sith holocron being included or something weird. I don't know. I think the idea of Horcruxes from Harry Potter was really kind of a cool way to kill a villain, and if it's going to be a way to revive a villain in this story, I really wouldn't mind if they kind of stole from that. But we're wrapping up finally on the end of this film, and it's a dense movie in regards to the lore. I'm so glad we've made it this far. For anyone listening, you're doing really well. I'm very proud of you.
For anyone who's listened to all 6 episodes so far, my goodness, you must be battling somewhere.
We get to Luke and Vader's final moments together, and Vader, of course, is the great line with the sad Imperial March playing in the background, I mind you, which I think is kind of funny, is "Let me look on you with my own eyes."
It's almost reminiscent of Phantom Menace, right? Kind of that like bittersweet at the end of Anakin's theme of Phantom Menace.
So, Jerry, hello. Great job.
Oh, just FYI, I just saw a tweet from David W. Collins that this week they are finishing their Star Wars trilogy podcasts and stuff. So the soundtrack show is going to be starting Return of the Jedi this week. So
that's awesome.
That is going to be good.
So there you go, guys. There's some other listening for you on the journey to the Rise of Skywalker.
Let me look on you with your own eyes. It just takes me right back to the Revenge of the Sith. What does that remind you of?
The last look.
Yeah.
It's that what we were talking about in Revenge of the Sith, where like the mask is coming down and the screens turn on and you see what he sees,
awful.
And it's cold, red, and just very it's very devoid of life, and it's such a sad. If you really think about it, it's so sad. Like. And it really adds a lot more, like you said, too. Let me look on you with my own eyes. Just, you got to think about it. I know he gets out of that thing every now and then, takes a little back to bath, when we're like that. But, I don't know, man.
Still not the same. Bubble bath.
He never really has got to look at Luke in the own eyes. And so you got to think that's, and me speaking as a father, I have a daughter, but I just can't even imagine that. Not being able to actually looking at the world through screens is just
that's awful. It is.
So,
we look at enough screens in our own life.
Could you imagine?
Screen time's like, hey, you spent 7 hours on your phone today. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Vader.
Well, one thing I want to bring up.
Twitter.
I love how sad and weak Vader is, no, go, my son, leave me, and Luke is just so kind. It's almost like I don't know if you ever had a grandparent or someone pass before you, but it felt a lot like that. It's like you just want to be there for them in their final moments, and Luke is very well aware, and I love this line. It made me tear up a little bit. Was, you already have Luke. You were right about me. You were right. Tell your sister you were right. It's like so cool that Vader found hope in his son, even after everyone thought he was a terrible monster for doing what he did. And he was. Let's be honest, he was a terrible person. But it's that idea of redemption, like Brad brought up earlier. He was right. Maybe Rey.
It's my favorite word.
Maybe like Rey said to, no, you will turn, Ben. I see it. I have foreseen it. You
Hey,
know,
man.
it's
Ben's gonna learn the full story come
oh,
December
dude,
19th.
I can't wait.
I don't think he knows the full story yet because obviously he didn't catch the very end
Yeah.
of it. So
If,
he didn't catch the happy
well, I
ending.
want to ask you this. Just out of speculation, do you think Vader like saw a lot of Padme in his son when he passed? Did he see like, like someone that cares for me even though I'm so broken and so conflicted? What do y'all think?
It's possible. I mean, you tend to see your. I mean, the famous thing, at least in Harry Potter, is like you have your mother's
Yeah.
eyes, you have Lily's
Yeah.
eyes. So,
Right.
I'm sure that's something we'll never find out.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, at least in Vader's dying moments, there was some sort of, you hear a lot about people when they die. They're like, I see
Yeah.
my wife, I see this
Yeah.
person in front of me. They're there,
Yeah.
okay. And a lot of times, people will say it could be just what your brain's going through at that moment,
Or
releasing
it's-
all of its endorphins right at once to kind of bring back those memories and some sort of some sort of
Life
form.
flashing
I
before your
can't
eyes.
even think of words at this point.
I get it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's possibly what Vader went through. I mean, it's very, very possible, and he spent so much of his life trying to bring her back. So that's probably his one thing he holds on
Yeah.
to for so long was his love was what damned him,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of the saddest and most tragic part about Anakin Skywalker.
It is, and I think especially for his
But it's also the love that saved him.
oh
so
well, yeah, and especially for his death, it's like this man is like on his last dying breath, and he like all he wants to do is be with his son, and he accepts his death, and he dies very peacefully, even though he was just shocked prior to that. But he dies very like, he just lays his head back, and it's over. And it's a really well acted scene, and I think it's funny that Sebastian Stan had no idea like the implications of that. He was like, "Yeah, I played Darth Vader, and I just died." It's like not Sebastian. Yeah, it's Sebastian Stan. Yeah, No, am I saying that wrong? Am I thinking of? I am thinking it wrong. Who played?
You're Sebastian
Sebastian
Shaw.
Shaw.
You're
Oh,
thinking
God.
Sebastian Stan, the Winter
Never mind.
Soldier. So
Sebastian Shaw was like, "Yeah, I played Darth Vader. No big deal." Now I want to ask you this. Jerry actually just brought it up. Does Kylo know his grandfather's actual death? Does he know it like we know it? What do you think?
I don't think so because, I mean, when he found out about Vader being his grandfather, I'm pretty sure that was like through the news,
Oh, yeah.
which happened in Bloodline.
yeah.
So, I think, that's a pretty powerful thing to touch on maybe, and especially in this day and age where there's a lot of misinformation out there and you can go down the wrong
Yeah.
path or believe in the wrong things if you don't check your
Right.
sources and check your facts, and which facts never lie. But I think for Ben, he definitely has some skewed facts, and what I think is a supposed force bond with Snoke, much like he has with Rey, but force bond can be used for dark side purposes as well, which is in Secrets of the Jedi. I think Snoke manipulated him to think a certain thing about Anakin and how he went down versus the reality of that. And I think being back in that throne room will bring Ben back to reality and give him those missing facts, which will then be the final catalyst and the final dagger in the Bendemption coffin. Dagger, or the key in the Bendemption coffin to open it up and release
Ray
what's
is
inside.
holding a dagger, so,
Well,
Yeah.
this is a good point to be made because you forget that even Rey acknowledges that, when she's talking to Luke around that little forced meditation pond they have in that room. He's like, "You turned him. You turned Vader. You were the one that did it." Rey acknowledges that. So there has to be some reality of that's a thing, or maybe Leia told her, that Luke turned Vader. It's a big thing. I don't know, and maybe that's something that Rey does imply in The Rise of Skywalker. I don't know if anyone else listening. Hopefully, you have. You probably hear three very tired men, and we'll be coming to our conversation in a close in a little bit. I can tell in my voice I've gotten more weary in my old age. But let's close this.
It's been 84 years.
Exactly. Let's close this conversation out with the ending sequence. Jerry already brought up the Han twin realization. I love that. But if I can rant on anything else real quick.
Sorry, my cat's trying to
No, it's
conversation
good.
here. He's like jumping up and hitting
Let
the
Jack
desk.
join.
So, all right, go.
I loved the funeral pyre sequence because this has way more implications than we realized. The original, I guess, when you watch the sequence now, it's like obviously Kylo Ren went back and found that burnt mask and made it happen. You know, like he saw something in it, and like the idea of fire in Star Wars is really huge, and I think it's an idea of cleansing, an idea of realization. You know, Luke stood before fire when he watched his parents get burnt. He stood before it when he's watching his his aunt and uncle get burned. He stood before the fire whenever he watches his father then burned. He stood before the fire yet again whenever he watched the tree burn down. It's this idea of fire is very important, I think, to the Skywalkers, and we even kind of see it in the most recent Duel of Fates thing with the TIE Fighter being on fire on what appears to be Octo. I have no idea what that is. I don't want to get into it just yet. But with that being said, this idea of fire is huge, and we've only seen 2 funeral pyres, which is Qui-Gon, the very beginning of the Phantom Menace, and then in bookends with Episode 6 with Vader being the funeral pyre. And how I interpret that is it's like Qui-Gon's mistakes are then like kind of fully visualized at the end of this. You know, he might have not been the chosen one after all. And this funeral pyre is this idea of cleansing the world of this possible mistake, and it's all over now, and we kind of see that's not the case when Ben Solo comes back around. Anyone have any statements on that? Brad, looks like you want to say something. Maybe.
Yeah, no, I think I'm very excited to see how this all wraps up. You know, the Phantom Menace started this all, and it's finally time we put an end to this endless cycle that he has caused so much harm in the galaxy and so much pain and suffering, and it's all linked back to him, and it's pretty scary stuff. Like his actions alone, Palpatine's actions alone, caused the Empire, caused the Sith to rise up, caused what's happening with the First Order. It's terrifying. He's the final loose end, and I know Ben Solo's gonna come out with that big blue crossguard lightsaber. That's my theory. I hope that's the case. Hope that's the case. Well, he's gonna rise to the occasion.
I think I'll give a call back to our to our Phantom Menace episode of the Bombad Buildup, where like I kind of think we're gonna get a version of the funeral pyre where it is Palpatine.
Oh wow!
And not necessarily a respectful, but like a final, like we have finally defeated. Mm-hmm. We're gonna make sure that this is done for good. It's kind of a like fire is cleanse is a kind of representation of cleansing. Vader having a funeral pyre is almost respectful of like kind of burning away maybe some of his sins or something, that the evil that he's caused. But I just think it would be kind of interesting if we have a funeral pyre, but it's for Palpatine.
It's reversed.
And it's not for the. Mm-hmm. It's more of like finally,
Well, which leads into the next ending sequence of this movie, the Celebration of Freedom. I don't have enough energy to talk about Yub Nub versus Victory theme, so I'll just make my claim. I think Yub Nub's significantly better. It's way more like exciting and fun. Anyone have any opposing views to me?
Brad, what about you, buddy?
Jerry, I know what Jerry's going to say.
Sorry, I'm losing track, guys. I'm so tired.
No.
You're good. Yub Nub or Victory theme? I am.
Wow, I just really spaced there. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
Dude, no worries.
It's a late eve.
Yub Nub or Victory Dance? I'm a huge Yub Nub fan. And if we don't get a Yub Nub musical number in The Rise of Skywalker, it's a disappointment, and I will complain about this movie for 2 years and create many YouTube videos about it. So that's all I'll say.
You have it. You heard it here, folks, guys. Whoa, wow. See, I'm not even making any sense at this point. You heard it here first, folks. You guys all know I'm Team Victory. Victory Celebration, I believe, is the title of the track. I just fits the whole.
It does. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
So I enjoy that. It's a more like triumphant final number. But I enjoy those little rascals bouncing around, singing, and all that stuff. That's kind of fun. My daughter loves that too. Like that's big. I'm just saying she really does love that. Like who doesn't love the Ewoks?
I agree.
So, a lot of people apparently.
Well, one thing I want to bring up to kind of end this huge discussion about such a dense movie. Yoda, Anakin, and Obi-Wan all looking on. The inclusion of Hayden. do you think at any point George was going to do something about that? Like, did you think that was? I know it was intentional. Obviously, it was intentional. But what does that mean? And I haven't read any leaks, and I don't know anything about the Rise of Skywalker. But going on a hunch that I have, I think Hayden is going to be involved in some regard because of just what they set up in this movie alone. What do y'all think, boys?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think again, this is started the Skywalker saga with the story of Anakin, so I think you have to have some sort of callback or mention of him. I think that is a requirement.
Totally.
Which kind of sounds a little bit like, selfish of me to say, but I just think from a storytelling perspective, you have to bring it back to that. It's what started everything, and it kind of needs to be acknowledged in some fashion. So I would say with pretty good confidence, we will see a Force Ghost Anakin.
I agree. What about you, Jerry?
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know. I've always kind of stood up for that. I know a lot of people got upset because they're like, well, it's supposed to be Sebastian Shaw, not Sebastian Stan. And, like, what that isn't that disrespectful? Like, I mean, you can always, like, try to find that version and watch that. But I've, in the scope of, again, the whole canonical saga here, I think it really makes sense that it is Anakin, is Hayden Christensen, because that's who we know of Anakin. That's what he was. To me, it makes sense because that's who he was when he was good. So I don't know. To me, in a spiritual sense, like that's his spiritual good form. So
definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
He wanted to go back to looking like Hayden Christensen.
Exactly. It's before the turn.
If I had unlimited power, I'd be like, you know what? I think I want to look, like I used to, back in the day when I was really cool and Padme.
Yeah, I'm the person I'm proud of. He was not proud of the person he became after he got burnt, obviously.
Right.
And I think it's a pretty cool scene, and I think it's definitely going to be utilized. And that kind of wraps up the movie for us. I'm so glad everyone can join us. But one thing I want to say, and I got to say it now too. I wrote in the show notes questions raised after watching the movie or when watching the movie. My biggest question is, and something I kind of want to end on too, how will we watch this throne room scene after the Rise of Skywalker? How are we going to see this? What will this be a new light for us? Will we see that the implications of the throne scene have lasted significantly throughout the lives of each Skywalker, including Ben Solo? Jerry, do you have anything you want to bring that up? Because that's something you actually wrote in your notes.
I think the way I'm going to watch it is I'm going to watch it thinking, man, I can't believe that Palpatine was a hologram this whole time. And just like one of those like elaborate ones. I can't believe that. Oh my god! In a big budget movie, JJ made Ian McDermott do a big like expository speech about how back in the Clone Wars we had these holograms that made you look 100% like a real person. And so no.
No, but what do you really think?
I don't know, man. It's clarity. Yeah. We're gonna the scene with a lot more clarity. It's going to be cool. I can't wait to rewatch this stuff when we finally get everything all together, and it's going to be transcendent.
I agree. That's a beautiful way to put it.
And that sounds like a good word at midnight.
Brad, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we'll view it in a somewhat of a different light. I know the whole prophecy of the chosen one, like what does it mean? I think the prophecy can really be interpreted however you need it to be interpreted, and that's something that's been talked about in Star Wars, especially Master and Apprentice. Totally. So I don't think it will diminish the sacrifice of Vader. I think his sacrifice was necessary, and I think in fact if they don't win the day in this final movie, then it would make his sacrifice in vain.
Yeah, man.
And the sacrifice of many others. So yeah.
That's awesome.
I also think Han Solo. This is another hot take of mine, but I think him dying was necessary for Ben's journey. As sad as it is to see him go, I think all these deaths in the family are needed to get to the point that we're at now.
I agree.
It sounds a little bit morbid, but I think it all means something in the end and helps the character realize something about himself. So
yeah, no, I don't think it's morbid at all, because you got to think the look in his face. He kills him, and he thinks in the novel we have him saying, like, oh, he thought he would feel like a swell of the dark side, and he just kind of feels empty. And so
it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the same.
100%.
It's all led to this final moment, and Star Wars always changes how we look at what came before.
It does.
So that's
right.
exciting.
So I'm looking forward most to that. But anyway, I gotta give a big thank you to Brad Whipple for being a amazing guest on this episode. This was 3 hours and 36 minutes of pure joy and just fun talking about this movie. And Brad, you have now made it the longest in the Bombadcast. How does it feel? I'll send you a trophy in the mail. You're welcome.
Yeah, I was about to say, where's my medal? Better be one of those like chocolate ones. You open them up and there's it's actually chocolate.
Yeah.
So I'd be a fan.
That's hint, right? No, dude, seriously, and you know what? I believe Brad is the founding member of the One and Only
Yeah, he
Club.
is.
I'm remembering correctly. I don't know. Don't come at me, members of the One and Only Club. But thank you again, Brad, for
Your time.
for coming and talking so long with us on here.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you guys. It's any opportunity to come on other podcasts is pretty great. It feels nice to be asked onto these things, especially because it tells me I'm doing something right. So I just appreciate your guys' support and for you reaching out. So always happy to talk the talk, especially if Bendemption's involved. I guess.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, buddy.
Or redemption.
If you don't mind, I'm going to plug your pod here, Brad. Friends of the Force is fantastic. Incredible editing.
Plug
I
away.
often take a lot of your editing cues and how you phrase certain things from your show, and I try to implement them into mine. So you're doing some really good things on your your end, and I hope everyone has the opportunity before The Rise of Skywalker comes out to go check out Brad's show, and especially even after, because the coverage does not end here. We've got, and I'm sure he's got a lot more in store in the coming months. I know we do.
Yep. Indeed.
All Star Wars content are very, very tired.
Yeah.
Star Wars
Totally.
year. But it's a good tired. I can't.
Yeah, I'm running 4 shows right now, so
Exactly.
it's pretty nuts. I might take a break though, leading up to this movie. There might be a little short hiatus.
We're gonna take one after
of episodes.
Yeah, we're gonna take one after.
The man has to sleep sometime.
Yeah.
You know?
Brad,
sleep.
where can people find you, dude? When after this is over, when people can, kind of take it easy, or actually even right now when they don't want to take it easy and on the Star Wars hype train, where can people find you, man?
Well, my podcast, Friends of the Force, is on iTunes, Apple. Those are the same things. Google, Spotify, etc. And we are on Twitter at Friends of Force and Instagram at Friends of the Force. So I post a lot of just fun Easter eggs, post episodes daily on those social media platforms, and we have a website that includes all the guests that we've had on the show. So if you're looking for maybe a possible interview or a possible talking point that we've discussed at some point, that would be the place you want to go. We just recently had actually Second Sister on the show most recently for my interview series. So I got to talk to her. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go check that out because she talks a lot about the character.
Oh, wow.
And, it's a pretty great conversation.
Hell yeah. That's cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, congrats. That's moving on up. That's fantastic.
Trying, but it's a lot of fun. We're all about positivity. You won't find any, negativity, bull crap that you might deal with online. That's kind of the biggest thing I try to go for. So thank you guys for being positive voices in the community and just loving Star Wars. So that's, I wouldn't come on here if I didn't think you guys fit into that category.
That's awesome, man.
You guys are awesome.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that.
It's high praise, Brad. Thank you. Well, hey guys, go support Brad, man. We really need to support positive Star Wars content out there. So let's drown out the hate with positivity for sure.
Totally.
Hell yeah.
Well, with that being said, thank you again, Brad. We'll see you probably very soon. If we were to plug anything real quick, our next episode will be covering The Force Awakens with Lacey Gillerin of the Resistance Broadcast and Star Wars Newsette. So super pumped for that. Just to do some quick plugs, you can find us on YouTube with actually, surprising enough, we didn't say it, we've now got 1 million views on the reaction video on Bombadcast page. So pretty cool stuff.
Rise of Skywalker
That's
celebration.
insane.
Trailer.
Yes. Congrats.
It's crazy.
That's
awesome.
all. That's all Scotty, man. He is front and center on that, and
I take
brunt
the
of
attack.
the likes and the
Yes.
hate.
But
So-
You getting that YouTube money?
Yeah,
Come
I guess
on.
you can say that.
Send you a paycheck.
But with that being said,
Disney
yeah,
money, right?
the show money, not the monetized money.
Yeah.
With that being said, we are looking very forward to what we have in the future. You can find me at Scotty Jera. I won't be responding to anyone, so there's no point in looking me up on Twitter. You can buy our shirts.
Scotty's in carbonite until after
pretty
Rise of
much.
Skywalker comes out. I'm gonna dress up like a bounty hunter and go defrost him in Louisiana after it's done.
Pretty much. No, you can get our
anyway.
shirts at TeePublic. For my students listening, go get you one. With that being said, yeah, I have nothing else to say. Bombadcast. Find us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. Join the Bombad fam, along with your stepmother, your former principal, and your old substitute teacher that used to DM you a lot the second you left high school, asking about where'd you got that shirt from. But yeah, no.
Okay, did you see that Will Ferrell sketch on the last
did not.
SNL? Where it's like the weird high school teacher who shows up at the party, but like he's not doing anything weird. He's just like, it's great. Go look that up. It's so fun. It's like, why is our teacher? He's being very cool and respectful. Like, it's so weird. Yeah, go check that out. Shout out to that. But that's pretty much what the Bombad fam on Facebook is like. So
just like it. But anyway, I'm safe. Everything's good. Jared, how are you? I mean, how do we end this?
We're all fine here. No, guys, you know what? Again, like Scotty was saying, check out our Bombad Fam official group on Facebook. You can come hang out with us on Twitter at Bombadcast. Go follow Brad and Friends of the Force. And you can follow me and my crazy ramblings at The Canon Junkie, Jerry Canon Junkie, at The Canon Junkie on Twitter. And... yeah, guys, that's really all I have. If there is nothing else from these wonderfully tired Jets, then I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know that you need to tune in next week, go get some sleep, and stay Bombad.
All Bombad.